The story began with ambulances flooding the scene after a horrific road accident involving a man in his early 30s who was hit by a truck and was in critical condition while police searched for 3 high school students. They were hit too, but disappeared from the scene, and at the same time the injured man was moved onto a gurney toward the emergency room in a semi-comatose state. He heard the doctors speaking a strange language. He did not understand a word, and on his deathbed, he felt his soul leaving as he recalled his life. His old life was full of misery and regret. Then the 34-year-old man woke up to find himself in the body of an infant and realized he had been reborn, discovering he was born to a young couple named Paul and Zenith in a strange land where they spoke the same strange language he had heard before dying, and in time he learned his name was Rudis, and within just 6 months he was able to learn the language of the land. Little Rudius became an overly curious child, and whenever he saw the maid Lilia, he stared at her with the gaze of a child who did not understand the world yet, though his eyes were wandering. Lilia tried to explain to Zenith that her son's behavior was strange, but Zenith laughed and told her he was just a small child who did not understand what he was doing, dismissing the matter entirely. Rudius sat by the window looking at the land around him, noticing it was very rural with no gas, electricity, or anything he knew. He saw his father practicing with a sword using impressive movements and was captivated by the scene, but in his excitement he forgot himself and fell hard on his face on the kitchen floor. His mother ran to pick him up quickly while Lilia was surprised that the child did not cry at all after the fall. Zenith grew worried and used something strange that emitted light from her hand to heal him. Rudius was shocked and realized he was born in a world of swords and magic. Years later, Rudius entered the storehouse as a small child and tried to open a heavy wooden box. After much effort, he retrieved one of 3 books, and though he did not understand it, he felt there was a secret. A few years later, when he learned to read, he returned to the book and began to understand that magic had 2 methods, either by specific incantations or special diagrams, and he read that magic power was determined at birth. He doubted himself and thought his luck might be bad, but he decided to try, reading a spell to produce a small ball of water that popped immediately. He was annoyed and tried again, but this time he thought of it as if he were playing a game performing combo moves. Suddenly the magic appeared without him speaking, which surprised him and drained his energy, leaving him sitting in the puddle he created. Over time, Rudius mastered magic without words and discovered that his power increased the more he used it. He continued to learn and practice until one day, while his parents were in the garden, he tried to develop the water spell and was delighted when it succeeded, so he got excited and tried a stronger spell, but suddenly a massive torrent of water released and broke the storehouse wall. His parents and the maid ran to the sound to find everything soaked and Rudius looking at the ground. Zenith was thrilled and suggested they bring him a magic tutor. Paul objected and reminded her they had agreed that if it was a boy, he would learn swordsmanship. Lilia suggested a compromise with magic in the morning and swords in the afternoon. Everyone agreed, but when the tutor arrived, everyone was shocked. Rudius sat imagining many things because he was a child with an overly active imagination. The tutor introduced herself as Roxy and was disappointed to learn the student was a small child, but she accepted the task. She explained the basics of magic and cast a spell to cut down a tree and restore it. Rudius tried to imitate her, but the wind broke his concentration and confused him. Roxy was amazed when she discovered he could cast magic without incantations. Meanwhile, a scene showed an obese, unemployed man with a ruined life being evicted from the place where he lived in a very humiliating situation. Suddenly, he saw a truck heading toward a girl, so he ran to save her and was hit himself. Months later, Rudius had advanced greatly in magic, but failed miserably in swordsmanship. Roxy found him hiding from bullies and told him about her past and a university far in the north called Ranoa, the best place to learn magic where everyone was treated equally. She advised him to go there, but he told her that she was his only teacher. Roxy tried to cast magic without incantations, but failed. A year and a half later, Rudius celebrated his 5th birthday. His father gave him a sword, his mother a book, and Roxy gave him a staff with a magic stone and told him he had finished the first stage, announcing his graduation exam. Rudius looked at the snow, remembering his old life, and felt like crying. The next day, he refused to go outside the village for the exam and put him on the horse against his will, reassuring him that everything was fine, while Rudius was confused and imagining there were mean kids standing around him. But Roxy kept calming him down, telling him the world was safe as they walked outside the village. Rudius looked around and got nervous if anyone looked at him. Then he discovered that people were actually focused on Roxy and no one noticed him, so he began to relax and enjoy the ride until they reached the test site, an empty land. Roxy told him she would use heavy water and focus, asking him to watch closely and memorize. He wondered why they were far from people, so she told him because if this water went wild, it could drown all the village crops. She spoke the magic words. Roxy healed him and told him this matter should remain a secret. They sat on a log and joked about what happened, and Roxy congratulated him and told him congratulations. He became very strong in water magic. Afterwards, she said goodbye to Paul and Zenith, and each of them tried to make her stay a little longer. She gave him a lucky charm and told him to do his best. She left and he ran after her, but could not catch her, so he thanked her from afar and remembered her favor to him and that she made the world outside the house not terrifying anymore. The next day, he asked to go out to play and was allowed, and people greeted him while he replied with a smile. In the field, he saw 3 people bothering a poor kid, so he scared them off with some water. He picked up the kid and noticed he looked chic. He cleaned him up a bit and was surprised by his green hair, remembering the words of Roxy. He looked for a red gem, but did not find it, so he breathed a sigh of relief, realizing he was a half-breed and people were prejudiced against him because of the hair. He told him they were friends and introduced himself. The kid started to say his name, but the wind interrupted him, so Rudius told him Sylph was a nice name while laughing and let it pass. Sylph asked to learn, and Rudius agreed. At night, Paul shouted because of the fight. Rudius explained, but Paul got angry and demanded an apology. Rudius stood up to him and said wrong was wrong. Paul reconsidered and apologized. The days passed and summer came. Rudius and Sylph became close friends, learning magic without words from each other. Sylph succeeded after attempts. As he ran with joy, it started raining, so they hid in the house. Lilia welcomed them and said the bath was ready. Afterward, they reconciled, and Paul joked and made them laugh. The family rejoiced at Zenith's pregnancy. Then Lilia announced she was also pregnant, and the atmosphere became electric. Paul confessed, and Zenith slapped him historically hard on the back of his neck. At night, they talked. Lilia said she intended to leave, and Rudius worried about her and decided to help, so he spun the topic gently. Zenith agreed she could stay, and Paul prepared for a long lecture. On a winter day, Lilia looked at his son while he was fighting and remembered that he stood by her, and decided to remain indebted to him all her life, also wanting the fetus in her womb to serve him after. The babies were born. Lilia and Rudius built a good relationship together, although his father was a corrupt man. Rudius respected him for his strength. After training, Paul tried to suggest school to his son, but quickly changed his mind and told him the school was full of spoiled kids, and his mistake might be becoming a target for bullying. Paul joked with Rudius about him being interested in girls and told him to focus on just one. In their usual place under the tree, Sylph asked Rudius why he was acting strange these days, and he joked and said he had been strange since the day he was born. Sylph told him he looked tired, and Rudius finally admitted he was not progressing in swordsmanship or magic. Sylph was surprised by his words and told him he was amazing, asking him if he planned to leave the village. Rudius confirmed that it might happen, but before he finished speaking, Sylph jumped on him and asked him without tears not to go. Rudius promised her he would not leave and admitted to himself that nothing was worth leaving a girl like Sylph behind. In the scene that followed, Paul entered his son's room to give him a letter. Paul announced he had a letter for him, and they sat down to read it together. The letter stated that Roxy wrote to Rudius about her recent achievement in teaching the 7th prince of the Chiron kingdom. She said she finally mastered king-tier water magic, and that the prince was a fast learner, but also a lustful young man. Roxy assumed that Rudius might have mastered emperor-tier magic and confessed conflicting feelings about meeting him again, promising she would work hard to catch up to him. The magician suggested to Rudius to seek enrollment at the Renoa Magic University if he had problems with magic, explaining that his king-tier magic was a rare class. The next day at breakfast, Rudius politely asked his father to fund university tuition for him and Sylph so they could attend together. Paul refused for reasons that he did not want to let him go as his teacher, and also he could not pay Sylph's expenses. Rudius agreed with his father and suggested that instead of his father paying the expenses, he find him a good job, so when he decided he was ready to leave the house, he would be able to pay Sylph's expenses alone, so Paul agreed. The next day, a carriage stopped in front of the Grey Rat family home, and the whole family except Rudius saw the beast person who got out of the carriage and recognized her as Ghislaine. Zenith sat talking for a while, and Rudius looked on, in confusion. Rudius and Lilia said goodbye to him. Paul asked his son to stay away from Sylph, then threw his son into the garden, and they started a battle. In the end, Paul beat Rudius until he fainted. Rudius woke up in the carriage to find Ghislaine sitting in front of him, introducing herself and telling him they would work together starting the next day. Rudius thanked her and said he was excited to work together. In the carriage, Rudius asked Ghislaine if his father left him anything, and Ghislaine tossed him a letter and told him to read it himself. Rudius opened the letter and read it aloud. The letter letter stated that Paul wanted him to tutor a noble girl of 9 years in Roa. The woman with him was the girl's bodyguard and a sword instructor, and she wanted Rudius to teach her in exchange for training him in swordsmanship. His father told him that over 5 years until he reached 12, he would teach her reading, writing, arithmetic, and basic magic, and he was forbidden from returning or sending letters or communicating with any one because he noticed he had started to depend emotionally on Sylph. Rudius looked out the window, thinking and convincing himself that this was for the best, and Sylph would not grow if she did not solve her problems alone. At the place they arrived at, Rudius noticed that most of the staff were beast people. After a while, the master of the house appeared and taught him how to act as a noble, introducing himself as Philip Boreas Greyrat, the mayor of the city and Paul's cousin. Philip asked Rudius how much he knew about his mission in Roa. Rudius told him he would help with university tuition after working with him for 5 years. Philip sighed and introduced him to his daughter Eris. Rudius approached her and introduced himself, but Eris, the spoiled and bossy child, yelled at him because he was smaller than her. Rudius tried to explain to her that age was not everything. The child slapped him on his left cheek. Rudius felt insulted and hit her back. After a while, the two started a close quarters fight, and Rudius seized the chance to escape and began planning to make Eris love learning. Philip agreed after hearing his plan. When Rudius entered his room, he wished to succeed. In the next scene, Rudius woke up in a kidnapper's bed and opened a box where Eris was tied up, telling her they had been kidnapped before freeing himself with fire magic and mocking her for not being able to free herself alone. Eris ran toward the door calling for Ghislaine, and at the same time a fat man broke down the door and beat her mercilessly. Rudius found the blows very realistic, and when one hit him on his left cheek, he stood up and moved away. Rudius went to the injured Eris and half healed her, and she asked him to heal her completely. Rudius told her she must heal herself. Eris was confused by the extreme violence, and Rudius listened closely behind the wall and understood they were in a real kidnapping place. After thinking, Rudius opened the room window and made an opening to escape. Eris asked him to take her with him. Rudius put her on the ground and made her promise not to scream or be violent. Then Rudius healed her completely, but Eris went and broke her promise and started talking loudly after hearing one of the kidnappers in the background. Eris walked and promised him she would not scream again. The two got into a carriage and traveled on the empty street. Rudius saw a worker from the mayor's house and ran toward him. Eris ran after her servant, but she was caught by the same kidnappers. Rudius ran after them and stopped them from escaping. The worker tried to persuade Rudius to join his gang, but he refused and launched a fire alarm before fighting the men. About to escape, their leader used a sword and threw it desperately at the children. Rudius could not block the sword, but Ghislaine arrived at the right moment and struck all the kidnappers with one move. Rudius was shocked by the blood on the ground and the dismembered attackers. In the mayor's house, Ghislaine handed over her master's servant, and Philip ordered him to be taken away. Eris, who fell on the floor, tried to stay present without her father's intervention and walked away. Rudius wondered what would have happened if he died early, accepted defeat, and walked quietly from the mayor's house. After a while, Eris asked him to stop and told him to call her Eris. Rudius thanked her for the opportunity and secretly rejoiced that he got his first official job. A few days later, while playing with Philip, Philip's wife Hilda came in. Philip introduced her to the small boy as Paul's son and Eris's new tutor. Rudius introduced himself politely by name and title, but Hilda looked at him with disdain and walked away after making a hissing sound. In that moment, an old man entered the room looking for Rudius. The man was shocked by Rudius's politeness and allowed him to stay in the palace. The servant introduced the loud old man as Sauros Boreas Greyrat, and Philip explained the situation and told him that this man was his father Sauros. Sauros hit his son Philip hard because he did not protect his granddaughter well, but Philip got up from the ground and told him he intended to thank him as a family. Sauros, possessor of a loud voice, asked Rudius to teach Eris magic, and Rudius quickly noticed a great resemblance between Sauros and Eris. Rudius politely said that Eris needed to learn to ask for things politely herself. Sauros agreed with his point and shouted for Eris at the top of his voice, and Eris ran enthusiastically and asked if her grandfather spoke with Rudius about her education, but she was shocked when her grandfather told her if she wanted something, she had to get used to asking for it herself. Over time, Rudius taught Eris magic, and the two learned the sword from Ghislaine, and Eris and Ghislaine improved in arithmetic and magic, all thanks to Rudius. Rudius himself learned proper swordsmanship, and Rudius had been the home tutor for a month, and she always disappeared and ran away when lesson time came. One afternoon, while Rudius was walking around the building, he spotted her in the stable. He tried to wake her, but discovered she was in a deep sleep. She woke up and hit him very hard in his face. In the next scene, Eris complained about the boring book, and Ghislaine and Rudis looked at her. Then Ghislaine told them a story about her love for swords and her desire to know everything about them, speaking about her adventures and the problems she faced because she did not know how to write or do math, telling of the time of Paul and Zenith's marriage and a solo mission where she could not calculate the money and was forced to walk 10 days without food or water, and her hunger caused her to turn into her beast form and eat disgusting things. To avoid falling into this situation again, Eris asked Rudis to give her more work. In another scene, Ghislaine supervised a mock battle between Rudius and Eris. Eris, who was bigger and more trained, defeated him and spat in his face. Ghislaine complained that Rudius always held back, and Rudius replied that he got scared when someone attacked him for real. Eris asked to repeat the training, and the three returned to their rooms late at night. On his bed, Rudius thought about how hard it was to earn money. The next day, Rudius thought Eris had started listening to him, but suddenly she started acting up again. The two children walked together in the open market. In the market, a merchant called out to Rudius and asked him if he was interested in a bottle of medicine, but he ignored him. In a random bookstore, Rudius looked at a list of things he wanted to buy while Eris peered over to see what he was doing. He stopped Eris from using her father's money and promised to ask her father for a fixed allowance for her. On the way back, a bird flew by, and Eris explained that Perugius was one of the three heroes who defeated the Demon King, Laplace. When Rudius asked about Laplace, Eris explained that he was an evil man who tried to wipe out humanity, and Rudius felt he had heard this story before, but could not remember where. Eris said Perugius was strong and the heroes defeated Laplace. Rudius thought that. He had read this story in a storybook at home. Rudius praised Eris for her fluency in history, and Ghislaine clarified it was the year 414 of the Armored Dragon calendar, named in honor of Perugius because he defeated Laplace. A week later, Eris learned to write better and asked Rudius about the bottled medicine, so Rudius ran away. The girls gathered around him, but she broke the expensive bottle by accident. Eris asked what the medicine was for, and Rudius ran away in embarrassment but was caught by Ghislaine. The girls tickled him hard to make him tell them, but he did not speak. At night, Rudius applauded his students, Ghislaine and Eris, for their success in casting fire magic. Hilda, the mother of Eris, watched her daughter and the students, seeing their progress, but looked at Rudius with disdain. At night, while Rudius was looking at a small figurine of Roxy he made, he heard someone knocking at the door. The dance teacher, Edna, entered politely and asked Rudius to give up his lessons with Eris for 6 months before her 10th birthday. Rudius agreed and was happy with his new free time. The next day, Philip and Rudius looked through the mansion's library, and Rudius loved the foreign books and said he wanted to learn a new language in his free time. Philip and Rudius dreamed of the beast god language and their women, so Rudius wrote to Roxy telling her he would start learning new languages. Months passed quickly, and Rudius found learning difficult. On a sunny day, Eris, as usual, ran out screaming in anger. Edna apologized to Rudius, explaining that Eris found dancing difficult, and asked him to help her so she would not embarrass herself on her birthday. In the stable, Rudius found Eris on the hay. He tried to speak to her, but she kicked him in the face. However, he convinced her to continue the dance lessons. Eris asked him to join her in the lessons, and Rudius laughed and accepted her request. In the next scene, Rudius and Eris danced together, and Rudius complained about her speed and her inability to follow the rhythm. The following months passed quickly, and Rudius learned the beast god language with Ghislaine's help. Eris learned the basic dance movements, and Rudius sold his first figurine. Rudius received a letter from Roxy about her life in the Shironi kingdom and taught himself the demon god language from a handwritten dictionary. Before Eris's birthday, Edna praised her for mastering the dance moves, but she was worried that Rudius would not partner with her. On the day of her 10th birthday, Sauros announced the start of the party, and a small boy asked Eris to dance with him, but she got angry and froze, and the guests began to whisper and laugh. Rudius decided to act and ask Eris to dance. She became nervous again, and Rudius knew she was tense, so he asked her to close her eyes and told her he would use magic to improve her dancing, ordering her to move as if she were avoiding an attack. Eris did as she was told and performed a magnificent display. After the dance, silence filled the hall, and suddenly loud applause filled the place. Sauros lifted the children onto his shoulders, and Eris smiled broadly. Edna asked in amazement how Rudius made her dance like that, and Rudius explained to them that she had learned to deal with feints and sword training, saying that Eris delayed her timing to avoid falling, and this made her dance correctly. Eris boasted about her teacher in front of the guests and charmed them. When 3 girls approached her at night, Rudius gave Ghislaine and Eris gifts and explained to them that magic teachers gave to their students. Ghislaine thanked Rudius with respect, and Eris, who previously complained she wanted a figurine, followed Ghislaine's steps and thanked him respectfully. Ghislaine gave Eris a ring that scared away wolves at night, and Eris wore it enthusiastically and sat guarding it. In the morning, Rudius woke up to find Eris sleeping next to him and went up the tower opposite his room. As he climbed the stairs, he heard moaning and decided to investigate the matter. In the next scene, Sauros adjusted his clothes and called Rudius from his place. Rudius saw Eris and a servant dragging a cart to the kitchen, followed them, heard their heated discussion, and found that the Boreas family was planning a secret birthday party for him. Rudius had recently discovered that his father's full name was Paul Notos Greyrat, and the Notos family was one of the 4 main families of the Greyrats, which was currently managed by Paul's younger brother, and a secret plan was being made to replace him due to his wild behavior. And since Rudius was of Notos blood, any news of his protection by the Boreas could cause problems. On his 10th birthday, Ghislaine tried to occupy Rudius in his room after Hilda sneaked away. Eris gave Rudius a staff as a birthday gift, and Rudius opened it and was dazzled by its quality. After the party, Philip and Rudius were the last people in the hall, and Philip suddenly told Rudius that Eris had 2 brothers, one older and one younger, but his brother in the capital took the boys immediately after birth because all sons of Boreas blood had to be raised in the family head's house. Hilda could not accept this and tried to hate Rudius, reasoning that another person's son should not enjoy the freedom of the place. Philip asked Rudius if he was ready to marry his daughter and take over the Boreas family rule with him, but Rudius refused, politely apologized, and walked to his room. In the village, Sylph visited Paul and Zenith Greyrat in their home and delivered her gift for Rudius and played with Aisha, Lilia's daughter. The 2 women, Zenith and Lilia, discussed how much Sylph had become strong because of Rudius's teaching. Paul returned from hunting monsters and drew his family's attention to the strange appearance and movement of the sky. In another scene, a white-haired man walked in a dragon's den, and a dragon breathed fire on him, but he was unaffected. The dragon looked him in the eyes for a moment, then flew away. In another land, Perugius assumed and linked the mana flow to an attempt by someone to undo the seal he placed on the demon king Laplace, and ordered his servant Almanfi to investigate the source of the mana flow and kill any suspicious person. In the field, Ghislaine and Eris looked at Rudius as he tested his new magic staff. Suddenly, an attack was directed at Rudius, and she blocked. The attack's violent. The attacker introduced himself as Almanfi the Bright and stated that he came by order of Lord Perugius to kill the source of the mana flow. Ghislaine introduced herself as the Sword King, Ghislaine, and boldly informed him that what he sought was not there. Almanfi agreed to leave and warned her that Perugius would hold her accountable if she was protecting the one responsible for the mana flow. The element in the sky disappeared, and the attacker used teleportation magic. The flow and the light expanded until it covered them all. After they were enveloped in the mana calamity, Rudius woke up in his old body and found himself in a bright place. A pixelated figure approached him and introduced itself as the human god and apologized, saying he was happy watching Rudius's diaries and that he was with him. But Rudius mocked him and accused him of making his dream of being born in another world while he had actually died. The pixelated figure corrected him and told him that he was speaking about his reincarnated life, not his previous life, and explained to him that when he woke up, he would find a man nearby and must rely on him and help him. After finishing his instructions, he disappeared, and Rudius woke from his coma. Rudius woke up next to a campfire and found Eris sleeping next to him. He moved backwards in fear and encountered a demon sitting on the other side of the fire, holding a staff, as if he were calm after. Saw a drawing on the wall. Rudius focused and greeted the demon, who saved his life and Eris's life in the demon god language. The demon told him that he and Eris fell from above, and he decided to take care of them, and Rudius thanked him and asked if he saw a beast woman nearby. The person told him he only found the 2 of them, describing him as a strange child because he did not run like the other creatures. Rudius told him confidently that it was illogical to run from his savior and introduced himself. The demon introduced himself as Ruijerd Superdia by name. The demon introduced himself as Ruijerd Superdaya. Rudius asked him where they were, and the person told him they were in the wilderness northeast of the demon continent. Ruijerd asked why a human child like him was on the demon continent. Rudius explained that he and his friends were caught in a massive mana calamity. Ruijerd promised him that he would do everything he could to return them safely. Eris woke up and was terrified by the presence of a super next to them and ran away crying for Ghislaine. Ruijerd explained to Rudius that this was normal behavior for anyone seeing him. After a while, Eris introduced herself by name and title, and Ruijerd replied with a greeting. Before the end of the night, Rudeus intervened and arranged for Eris and Ruijerd to become friends. In the morning, the 3 began their long journey and decided to stop at a demon village. After hours of walking, a villager refused their entry, but when Ruijerd looked at him threateningly, the man agreed to call the village chief to approve their entry. The chief saw them and spoke to them, and after the conversation, he allowed them to enter the village when he noticed the pendant on Rudius's neck and asked where he got it. Rudius easily told him it was a gift from his teacher Roxy. The man was surprised and told him the name of his daughter, Roxy, and Rudius was happy to be in her hometown. While wandering the village, Rudius learned that Roxy had left the village over 20 years ago and was now 44 years old. At night, the chief honored them and took them into a house while smoking a pipe, asking how they planned to get home. Ruijerd told him his goal was to help them return safely. Rudius watched the adults talking and asked about Ruijerd's goal. The chief explained that Ruijerd wanted to clear the Superd's bad reputation. Ruijerd said they were betrayed by Laplace and explained how Laplace, who united the demon race and demanded rights from humans, betrayed them and made them kill each other unknowingly. His brother, who died, sacrificed himself to free him from the curse. Ruijerd raised his spear and said that as the leader of the Supered warriors, he was responsible for restoring their reputation. Rudius sympathized with him and promised to help however he could. In the morning, the travelers thanked the villagers. Roxy's parents gave Rudius a sword and money as a gift of gratitude for informing them of their daughter's safety. Rudius thought about Ruijerd's story from the previous night, while Eris trained with the sword he gave her. Rudius ran to Ruijerd and said he was looking forward to being his travel companion. On the next day, the group hid behind a rock formation a few meters from the demon's city. At the city gate, the guards asked the demons if they had any news about Dead End. Rudius asked, quietly, what Dead End meant. Ruijerd told him some regions called him that. Ruijerd offered to jump over the cliffs while the others entered the proper way, but Rudius stopped him and suggested an idea after seeing blue dye on the ground. The group entered, the gate claiming to be residents of the Migard tribe. Rudius and his companions explored the city. Eventually, they decided to become adventurers, to earn money temporarily, and went to the Adventurers Guild to register. At the guild, Rudius introduced Ruijerd, whose hair he dyed blue as Dead End. The adventurers laughed and mocked them. The receptionist asked Rudius if he was sure about the team name, Dead End, and Rudius confirmed it with a small boy's smile. The receptionist told him he was now an adventurer of F-rank and explained the rules. Then Eris pulled him along to choose a quest, and while Rudius was studying the available quests, an adventurer came and mocked him for choosing a C-rank quest, telling him to pick a smaller quest like finding a lost pet. Outside the guild, Eris complained to Rudius because he did not take any quests, but he reassured her they would do so in the future and encouraged them to celebrate their first success. Ruijerd asked what he meant by first success, and Rudius told him that the adventurers laughing after he introduced them as Dead End was a success and progress. While Rudius was inquiring about a room at an inn, a group of adventurers approached Eris, and their leader was a female demon who asked Eris to eat with them. But Eris, who still did not understand the demon god language, got annoyed. Suddenly she spun around, and her sudden movement caused the clasp of her hood to open, revealing the outfit of the aggressive 10-year-old girl she was. She struck a violent blow that sent everyone in the party flying into the walls, and as if that was not enough, she approached them and stomped on the party leader several times until Rudius intervened. He saw the party leader, apologized, and explained that his friend did not understand the demon language. The party leader asked Rudius to join his team, but Rudius refused politely. In their rented room, Rudius checked his wallet and noticed they were running low on money. He lay on the bed and entered a meditative state. In the meditation, he saw a white figure in a foggy space, telling him to accept a small quest to find a stray cat to solve his worries. Rudius woke from his meditation in the middle of the night to find Eris sitting on her bed looking out the window. He approached her and asked what was bothering her. After a long silence, Eris asked Rudius if they could reach home, and Rudius reassured her they could. She asked again about Ghislaine and her grandfather, and Rudius reassured her again. In the morning, the group followed Ruijerd while looking for the lost cat. Rudius led them to the entrance of a dark cave with a very bad smell, and they all entered to explore. Inside the cave, they found not only the cat but also many other trapped animals. When they sensed the kidnappers coming, they hid behind the rocks, and after they set a quick trap, they caught 2 of the 3, and with collective effort, they tied the kidnappers to the wall. Rudius approached the group leader and tried to interrogate him, but he was punched so hard he fell to the ground. In a second, Ruijerd cut off their leader's head. Rudius trembled with fear and asked why he killed him. Ruijerd simply said, because the leader hit a child. Rudius told him trembling that if he killed anyone, whether evil or not, it would tarnish the group's reputation. Ruijerd felt uncomfortable when Rudius said he did not want to hate him. The remaining 2 begged for mercy, and Rudius approached them threateningly and asked them why they were kidnapping animals. They confessed they were D-rank adventurers and were kidnapping animals criminals to pretend they found them and take the rewards. Rudius stopped Ruijerd from killing them and suggested they work together, and indeed they were scared and agreed. Ruijerd, who was against villains, argued a bit but eventually agreed and promised to take them home safely after Eris hit him several times and asked him to walk instead of complaining. In the morning, the group took the money for the first job, and the villains announced they raised their rank to E as requested. Rudius ordered them to take B-rank jobs while they took F-rank ones and threatened to spread the name Dead End in a good way. Later, a higher-ranked adventurer came out of the guild and mocked them that they were still together. Rudius looked at the demons as he walked. On the human continent, Roxy ran to the bulletin board to examine the list of victims from the massive mana calamity. She flipped through the list and discovered the names she wanted were not among the registered dead. Behind her were two beasts talking fondly about Paul. Roxy asked them why they knew him well, and they asked why she wanted to know. Paul wrote a note to his son about the disappearance of Zenith, Lilia, and Aisha, and said he would stop searching for them because Rudius was capable of finding his way home. He announced he would travel to the Millis continent and left a message for the family of Lilia and Zenith to search in the north of the central continent. He asked anyone who found his message and knew his family or former members of the wolf pack to help him. At the end of the message, he asked whoever found it to write to him at the Millis Adventurers Guild and added detailed information about his location. Rudius, Eris, and Ruijerd took a new C-rank job. According to the description, the team had to investigate a mysterious monster in the petrified forest. Eris was happy and imagining the upcoming battle, while Rudius was happy in his heart that he found a solution to the money problem. In the forest, the group saw the adventurer team they met before bullying him, a higher-ranked team, when they realized they were all in the forest for the same goal. The higher team mocked them and said the mission went to whoever arrived first. Eris and Rudius announced the start of their journey, and Ruijerd suggested they follow the group of young adventurers in case something happened. Monsters in the forest attacked the young adventurers as Ruijerd predicted. Ruijerd tried to help them, but Rudius ordered him not to intervene, so the situation would become desperate and the group could intervene later. In a second, Rudius watched in horror as a monster killed and threw an adventurer against a tree. Immediately, Ruijerd and Eris entered the battle and killed the monster. After the battle, Ruijerd asked Rudius why he prevented him from saving them from the beginning. Rudius trembled and said he thought this would benefit them more. Ruijerd pinned Rudius against the tree and accused him of letting a child die for trivial reasons. The team leader came and told him that all adventurers knew the danger of their job and blamed herself for overestimating her team. Rudius acknowledged her courage and apologized for treating them as children. After the two teams separated, Rudius and his companions heard the sound of battle and ran. The mysterious monster appeared with an adventurer half in its mouth. Ruijerd identified it as the Red Cobra. Rudius asked if they could defeat it. Ruijerd confirmed they could kill it. Although they defeated the monster in the city, one of the guys who mocked them on the first day at the guild threatened to report them to the guild for trading jobs with higher-ranked adventurers. Rudius asked him coldly what he wanted, and the guy laughed and asked for half their monthly money. Rudius wondered to himself why. Everything since they arrived in the city was not going right and thought of a permanent solution, deciding to kill the blackmailers. Ruijerd understood what Rudius intended to do and stopped him. The demon who was threatening them fell to the ground and was terrified when he realized the blue-haired monster was the real Dead End. Ruijerd lifted him by his neck, and the demon apologized and said he had children at home. Ruijerd told him they would leave the city quickly and threatened to come back for him if the adventurer license was revoked. Afterward, when the city authorities arrived, Ruijerd fled alone. Rudius approached the young adventurers, who were trembling, and asked them why they were afraid when he had saved them before. After that, Eris and Rudius met with Ruijerd, and Ruijerd apologized, and Rudius said to him that he was the one who must apologize for his actions. Ruijerd praised Rudius because he had something to protect and called him a warrior, explaining that a warrior is a person who protects children and values his colleagues, and promised to protect him whether he could restore the image of Dead End or not, and asked from him to focus on what he wanted to protect. Rudius thanked him and reassured him he would be able to restore the image of Dead End. In the morning, Ruijerd shaved his hair, and Rudius gave him a bandana to cover his third eye. Rudius admitted he was always trying to solve everything alone and promised to work better to achieve their goals. 1 year after the massive mana calamity, Rudius and his companions passed by the sea, and Eris, who had never seen the sea before, was very excited by the scene. Ruijerd said the sea was full of monsters. In the harbor, Roxy, with two people she met last year while browsing the list of mana calamity victims, disembarked from the ship they took to reach the demon continent. On the other side of the same harbor, Rudius and his companions were talking with a fan, and the man called them by their street names: Ruijerd, Mad Dog; Eris, Red Dog; and Rudius, owner of the Dead End. Ruijerd was upset when he learned that Rudius's ticket from the demon continent to the Millis continent cost 200 green coins. In a restaurant near the harbor, the three discussed how to collect collect the huge sum, but when they found no solution, Ruijerd apologized because he was the reason for their delay. At night, Rudius thought of a way to collect money. Rudius woke from a long state of meditation in the middle of the night and did exactly what he was told. While Eris and Ruijerd were training by the sea, Ruijerd saw a blue-haired demon peeking at them from behind a tree. He got distracted for a moment, and Eris seized the opportunity and hit him, finally happy because she managed to hit him after a full year of training. While returning from the food vendor, Rudius decided to follow the advice literally. At the entrance of the alley, he saw an old woman whose hair resembled Roxy's and thought about what Roxy was doing now. He paused for a few seconds before continuing to walk in the alley. At that same moment, Roxy ran past the alley, and he did not see her. Rudius saw a hungry and dirty beggar demanding food violently and thought maybe this was the reason. The white figure told him to cross the alley. He approached her and gave her the food he bought from the vendor. The beggar, who looked like a small girl, thanked Rudius and told him to introduce himself, and he introduced himself easily. She introduced herself, saying she was Kishirika Kishirisu, the great emperor of the demon world. Rudius understood she was just a child who liked to play the role of king, but decided to play along. He bowed and greeted her in an exaggerated manner, and the small girl appreciated it and offered to grant him one wish in exchange for saving her life. The supposed demon emperor gave Rudius a demon eye after rejecting his requests for wealth, her body, and half the world, telling him not to hesitate, to use it if he needed anything. That day, Rudius obtained the Eye of Foresight. While trying to return home with the new eye, he bumped into a man with a scar. The man started to complain, and Rudius saw in his mind that a pot would fall on his head, so he quickly pushed him away. After the incident happened, the man sat on the ground, his eyes wide with fear. He told Rudius about the demon who gave him the eye, and said he heard of Kishirika Kishirisu, the great emperor of demons, and that she hid 12 demon eyes in her body and could see everything. Rudius apologized to his companions and told them he intended to stay in his room until he got used to the new eye. A week later, Rudius mastered the use of the eye. He challenged Eris to a fight to test it, saw all her movements, and defeated her easily. Ruijerd praised Rudius's ability to use the eye in 1 week. Rudius got arrogant and challenged Ruijerd to a fight. In the next scene, Rudius sat with a swollen face and tried to talk to Eris, but she replied rudely and complained about how harsh life was on her. Late at night, Rudius blamed himself for enjoying defeating Eris when he should have found a way to return her home. He got out of bed and walked from the base with his staff. Ruijerd asked him what he was doing with the staff, and Rudius tried to lie but admitted in the end he wanted to sell it. He explained he preferred selling his treasures rather than destroying a piece of the group. Ruijerd demanded to know why he wanted to solve matters alone. Rudius told him the only remaining option was selling the staff, running away, or smuggling. After a discussion, Ruijerd, despite his principles, suggested they go for the smuggling option and asked Rudius to contact the smuggler. At that moment, Ruijerd felt a presence and asked who was behind them. A man with a scar appeared suddenly and told Rudius he was looking for him to thank him, introducing himself as G. Snookeria with a mischievous glint in his eyes. In the Adventurers Guild, Roxy and her companions were gathering information about Paul's family. Roxy claimed to join a C-rank team, but was rejected because they already had a team and she was an A-rank adventurer. After a while, Roxy asked her companions about the days of Paul and the Black Wolf, but they were brief and said he was a bad person and did not like to talk about him, but she saw their respect for him. Roxy and her companions split up to gather information in their own ways. At night, the group shared the updates they collected. Roxy told them about Dead End and the adventurer team that suddenly became famous in the Demon Continent after the Mana Calamity. Their third companion shared his information about the team. After many fruitless attempts, Roxy decided to stop searching for Rudius and suggested they focus on finding Lilia and Aisha instead. The next day, Roxy walked on the beach and saw two people training. She hid behind a rock and watched them having a mock battle, and as she watched them, she thought they were dead, and because of the traits similar to the rumors. Roxy noticed that one of the members was missing and understood that the tall man was a real Superd. As soon as their demon eyes met, Roxy ran to protect herself, crossed an alley, and reached the end while running. In the next scene, Ruijerd was being smuggled after agreeing to free smuggled goods as payment for his travel expenses. Eris and Rudius traveled on normal ships, and Rudius saw his different life in hallucinations during the trip, while Eris suffered from seasickness. After being distracted from his dreams, he used his healing abilities to help Eris until they reached their destination, the Millis continent. Eris and Rudius settled in a small town, and Rudius apologized and went to get Ruijerd from the smuggler's place. Rudius found the way to Ruijerd's cell, and when he started freeing him, Ruijerd told him secretly about 6 held beast children, and the 6th child was killed because he cried too much. Rudius quickly understood they were the smuggled goods Geese spoke about. He pointed to the place full of guards, but Ruijerd told him to kill them because they killed children. Rudius hesitated, and Ruijerd offered to finish the mission himself. Rudius freed the children, trying to appear strong, but Ruijerd saw through his act and told him not to dirty his his hands with blood. Rizz freed himself and began his attack while Rudius freed the children and took them out of the place. While leaving, one of the small children started crying and said they forgot someone, so Rudius offered to go back while Rizz took the rest to safety. Rudius returned to the detained child and tried to free him, noticing he was locked by magic, so he broke the magic and freed him easily. The cute small beast started licking Rudius as an expression of thanks. While playing, the beast let out a roar and sent high waves, and Rudius felt paralyzed from his head to his feet. The beast carried Rudius and took him away, telling his father that he paralyzed one of the smugglers. The father told him he was just a small boy, but the beast told him Rudius was playing with the sacred beast. With a wicked smile, Rudius tried to explain himself, but could not move his mouth, and the beast suggested using him to track the prey. But the father smelled his blood and ordered them to return to the village with Rudius, while the sacred beast tracked the scent trail. Rudius woke up in a hanging cell. The beastmen were upset, and Rudius analyzed his cell situation and handled it carefully to avoid getting lost in the great forest. The beast guard came and splashed cold water on him as part of the daily routine, and Rudius tried to explain that he was the one who saved the children, but the guard ignored him. After many attempts, Rudius decided to wait for Eris and Rizz to save him. The days passed, and Rudius was still imprisoned in the cell. After days, a new inmate was transferred to the cell. Rudius annoyed him a little and asked him why he came here. The inmate confessed he was caught cheating in a dice game and asked Rudius why he was there. Rudius explained everything and introduced himself by his real name. The inmate found the name familiar, but ignored the topic and asked Rudius if a red-haired girl and a big bald man were looking for him. When he found out they were not there, Rudius began to exaggerate his reaction because he was abandoned. At night, Rudius suggested escaping, but the inmate told him to forget that plan. They argued a bit until Rudius decided to kidnap the guard and make him take them to the city. The inmate tried to stop him from opening the cell door when they noticed the absence of guards and the smell of smoke, and Rudius used the Eye of Foresight to monitor the situation. The inmate was surprised and asked if Rudius caused the big fire, but he shook his head no. After seconds, the wooden cell caught fire, and they were forced to break the door and exit. Rudius gathered his clothes. Rudius grabbed his staff and ran toward the burning village with his inmate. In the beast village, the locals were being slaughtered and treated violently by a group of human smugglers. Rudius decided to save them so they would feel indebted to him, and he began to gather all the cold air he could with magic and released it in the form of rain, extinguishing the fire. The attackers ran toward Rudius and the inmate, and Rudius thought of escaping, but suddenly the beast he had held at the smuggler's place appeared before him and thanked him before fighting the men attacking his village. After they finished the group of men around them, the beast asked Rudius to help him eliminate the rest, and Rudius agreed immediately. The three cooperated, making it easy for them to finish the rest of the men who were trying to kidnap the children from the village. After a while, the known man with a scar appeared to them with an evil smile on his face, and Rudius frowned when he recognized him. The man asked Rudius what he was doing on the other side of the battle and said the red-haired girl and the superd did an excellent job distracting the beast warriors. He told Rudius that they were just bait to attract their attention and invited him to join him, trying to convince him that selling beasts brought more money, but Rudius refused categorically. The beasts came from behind the trees around them, and the beast with Rudius attacked the enemy. In a few quick moves, Rudius finished them all. The inmate looked in amazement and said their opponent was using North style, and another man named Gallus welcomed him and confirmed he was a North saint. Gallus challenged Rudius to come after him. Rudius thought of escaping, but changed his mind when he heard Gallus mocking the small hostage he was holding while she screamed in pain. Suddenly, the white sacred beast attacked Gallus, and Rudius seized the opportunity and attacked Gallus with magic. The battle began between Gallus and the three. After Gallus tried to dodge the sacred beast's attack, Rudius threw magic shards at him, but he managed to dodge them all. At the same time, Gallus stabbed him in his right thigh. Gallus tried to deal a fatal blow, but the sacred beast and the inmate intervened. Rudius saw a second chance and cast a spell to blind and weaken Gallus, and after defeating Gallus, Rudius fainted from consuming all his magical energy. Rudius woke up with the sacred beast licking half his face. He heard Eris calling him, got up, and asked where he was. They told him he was in the chief's house. Eris was very happy that he defeated a North Saint and the beast, apologized for imprisoning him due to a misunderstanding, and requested punishment for their actions. The land chief thanked them, and Geese smiled and asked Eris why it took so long to find him. Eris enthusiastically told him everything that happened during the week he was in prison. First, after leaving Rudius, Rizz met Chief Gustava. And second, there was another misunderstanding that led him to almost fight the Doldia warriors. But after the problem was resolved, they went on to defeat the rest of the smuggling gang. The officials at the Zant port blamed them for the smuggling. At the same time, Ghislaine did not participate in the whole matter and sat all week guarding monster hides. Rudeus said with a smile that what happened in the Beast Village would be a great story someday for the Boreas family. In Roa, Sauros was sentenced to death for failing to respond appropriately to the mana calamity. At night, Rudeus and his companions spent time at the chief's house, and Eris taught the Beast Warrior girls how to introduce themselves in the human language. Rudeus was proud and happy, watching his student teaching others. The Beast approached Eris to thank her and saw a ring with the Doldia tribe symbol on her left finger and asked her how she got the ring. Eris simply said that Ghislaine gave it to her on her 10th birthday. The beasts in the room exchanged sharp looks, but Eris and Rudeus asked about Ghislaine innocent. The beast said he thought she died a long time ago, and Rudeus asked fearfully why he said that. The beast said she fled her duty to her land. He grabbed the beast, Jais, his daughter, and said Ghislaine was a disgrace to the people, carried her forcefully, and left the room. Eris ran after Jais with tears and defended Ghislaine. Rudeus approached her and explained calmly that the version they knew of Ghislaine was different from the version the tribe knew. The beast was surprised and asked if Ghislaine had become a respectable person, and Rudeus said he at least earned her respect. In Eris's private room, she was looking at the ring and remembering when Ghislaine gave it to her. Eris was distracted by the arrival of the beast girls who sat next to her. One of them asked her about Ghislaine, and Eris started telling them how wonderful Ghislaine was. One of them said she did not want to learn the sword, but her father was pressuring her. Eris remembered when she was little and did not like learning, and told her she also used to hate learning, but Ghislaine taught her the way of the sword. The girls decided to learn fighting like their aunt from Eris, and Eris agreed immediately. At the same time, Ghislaine's older brother was eavesdropping on the conversation. In the next scene, Rudeus and the beast watched the girls training by the waterfall. The beast asked if Ghislaine really taught. Eris and Rudeus confirmed and said Eris loved Ghislaine, the Sword King. The beast was shocked to learn that his sister had become a Sword King and learned other skills. After 3 months of training, Eris announced she intended to leave when the rainy season ended, and Tona did not accept the news and tried to stop her with violence, but Eris refused. In the next scene, Tona's sister, Tersena, reported a fight between Eris and Tona. Here, after the fight was broken up, Rudeus praised Eris for controlling herself. Tersena tried to make her sister apologize, but she failed. Their father entered and said the guests were leaving the next day. He told Tona the story of Ghislaine and regretted that he did not help her before, adding that his past actions were enough to ensure Ghislaine would not return to the village. Again, he asked Tona if she wanted that kind of relationship between Eris and her sister. Afterward, Tona and Tersena entered Eris's room to apologize. On the next day, the chief thanked Rudeus and his companions for their help. The beast asked Eris to show him the sword skills Ghislaine taught her and offered her a duel. The locals gathered to watch the competition, and after one move, they determined the winner. The beast praised his competitor, and Eris promised she would defeat him next time. The locals bid farewell to the guests, and they began to travel in their carriage. Minutes after their departure, the inmate Rudeus fought with jumped into their carriage and said he escaped from prison. After a short conversation, the group allowed him to travel with them. In the forest, the group passed a memorial monument for the 7 great powers. When they asked the man about its meaning, the inmate explained they were the 7 strongest fighters in the world. Ruijerd admitted that when he was young, he trained to be one of the 7, but in the end, he did not become one of them. Eris was excited to see them, but the inmate told her no one knew the location of the top 4, and the whole story might be a big tale. Rudeus and his companions reached Million. The inmate announced he would leave and advised Rudeus to go to the Adventurers Guild. At night, Rudeus held a strategic meeting with the rest of his team and suggested they stay in Million for a while to gather money. He announced the plan he prepared to save the reputation of the Superds. He took out a small figurine of Ruijerd, proposed a plan to save people and reveal Ruijerd's identity, and gave each of them a figurine as a charm. He suggested they take the next day off so he could mass-produce the figurines and write a letter informing everyone they were safe. Rudeus asked the others what they would do in their free time. Eris was thrilled and thought about hunting goblins, but Rudeus was skeptical of the idea. The next day, Rudeus was writing a letter to his father when he looked out his window and saw a group of kidnappers boarding in an alley opposite his room. Hesitantly, he gathered his things and ran after them. After he reached their hideout, he hid behind a large crate to watch them. Rudeus found 2 hoods, the kidnappers, called for backup and prepared themselves for battle. Rudeus got on a crate, put a hood over his face, and claimed that he was Ruijerd from the Dead End Party. One of the kidnappers accused him of playing the hero. Rudeus attacked him, and after finishing the first wave of kidnappers, Rudeus walked toward a victim who looked familiar. More kidnappers flooded the room, and Rudeus fought them. The group leader was drunk. He attacked Rudeus, and Rudeus also noticed the attacker was familiar. Rudius was surprised by the drunk man's amazing fighting style. After a few attacks, the drunk man realized who his enemy was and became confused. Rudius trembled at the sound of his nickname, Rudy. He looked up and saw a rough, drunk version of his father, Paul. In the Adventurers Guild, Paul and his son sat together, one-on-one. Paul said awkwardly that he was happy to see him alive, and Rudius innocently asked what he was doing in Millis. Paul asked if he had not seen the note he wrote and asked Rudius what he did for the past 2.5 years. Rudius smiled and began recounting his journey from the day he woke up on the demon continent. Paul interrupted him and scolded him for fooling around all of last year. Rudius frowned and said his days were hard, but Paul accused him of talking about the hardships of his life while smiling. Rudius admitted he might have been a bit rash, but Paul demanded he explain why. He did not try to learn about the rest of the Calamity victims while on the demon continent. Rudius realized he had no answer and told him he never thought about that because he was very busy. Paul scolded him because he had time to help a stranger demon, but did not have time to worry about the other displaced people, and continued rebuking him for not trying to contact anyone while being an adventurer. Rudius exploded and said he did not know where he was or what he was doing, and that at least he thought to protect Eris. Paul hinted that he did not contact anyone because he feared extra guards would interfere with his romance. Rudius got angry and accused Paul of being a hypocrite because he dealt with women without his wife and Lilia knowing. Paul punched him in the face, and the two got into a physical fight, and Rudius hit his father. Norn, his sister, pushed him away. When he realized she was his sister, Rudius tried to ask her if she remembered him, but Norn yelled at him to stop bothering her father. Rudius looked around and decided to leave in shame. As he left, Paul said that everyone in the village was caught in the calamity, and he left a message at the Adventurers Guild in Zant Port, asking his son why. He did not read it. Rudius wondered to himself why he assumed everyone in the village was safe. He asked worriedly about Sylph, but Paul got annoyed and asked if he was worried about his girlfriend more than his mother. Paul said they formed a search party to look for everyone displaced, and Rudius asked why the search party was kidnapping people. Paul explained that some people were displaced suddenly and did not know where they were, so they were tricked and enslaved. Rudius understood why the victim he saw earlier was familiar. He was one of the kids who used to bully Sylph, and his vision blurred. Finally, Rudius walked away to plan his next move, but he ended up minutes later, next to the letter he wrote. At night, Eris and Ruijerd found Rudius depressed, and after some persuasion, Rudius told them gloomily that his father was in the city. Eris declared she would kill Paul, but Ruijerd stopped her and told her to comfort him instead. In a wide field, the man of the calamity held Norn in his lap as she asked where they were. Paul looked around for the rest of his family and tried to retrace his steps. He saw the strange sky and thought it was the cause of the strange scene. When Norn called him, he told her not to worry, and they decided to hurry home. Paul and his daughter tried to cross different climate zones until they settled in Millis. Paul began to organize a search party over the year. Gis, the prisoner who traveled with Rudius, saw Paul, who asked him violently where he had been, but Gis joked and told him about his bad mood. Gis asked Paul to go to the guild the next day and asked why he looked so down. Paul tried to avoid talking, but after a while, he spoke and recounted everything that happened the previous day at the guild. After Gis heard Paul's story, he told him he expected too much from an 11-year-old boy, even though he himself could not do half of what his son did at a young age. He asked Paul if he could survive on the demon continent when he was 11, but Paul said that he had a super guard helping him, and it was not wrong to have expectations of talented people like his son. Gis said that he was underestimating the danger of the demon continent, and that no matter how smart his son was, people had limits, especially children. Paul objected and said if the journey were truly hard, he would not have talked about it while smiling, but Gis told him he was likely trying to reduce his frail father's worry. Gis spoke about cutting ties with his own father if he had acted that way, and Paul felt uncomfortable. Before leaving, Gis told him to be happy at least that his son survived. The next day, Rudius and his companions were eating in silence. Paul entered, and Eris sensed Rudius's serious reaction and confronted him. Paul introduced himself as Rudius's father. When Eris refused to let him get close to his son, Paul accused Rudius of hiding behind a woman. Rudius pulled Eris back and asked her to leave space for the two, but Eris resisted until she was pulled out of the room. The two sat at a table to recount their problems. Rudius asked Paul to look at him, and Paul admitted he came to apologize for the previous day, but Rudius told him not to apologize and admitted that the past year had been like a game until recently, and it was natural for him to be angry. Rudius apologized because he did not take things seriously, and after a silence, he apologized again because he could not find his letter, asking about its content. Paul summarized the letter and asked his son about his next step. Rudius said he intended to take Eris and return her home, but Paul told him that the town and all the people had disappeared. Rudius insisted they would go home no matter what and said he would look for the rest of the family later. As he was about to leave, the barista who was watching them brought him a free cup and advised him to look at his father's face. Rudius looked at his father and a feeling passed through his eyes. He recognized that look like the one he saw in his previous life when he was afraid of the only person who cared about him because of his pride. He knew his father was trying to fix things between them and suggested they start over and forget what happened, asking his father to open his arms. Rudius jumped into his father's hug. Paul was moved and cried while hugging his son, admitting he thought they had all died and apologizing for his behavior. Then Eris and Ruijerd entered and saw Paul and Rudius talking. Rudius was surprised to see Eris with a bruised eye. Eris asked Rudius about his forgiveness of his father, and Rudius explained to them that they reconciled. After a while, Rudius saw Eris's wounds and announced the start of a second strategic meeting. He told them that his father gave him money for travel and a letter of introduction for travel. Rudius told Eris gravely about the disappearance of their town, but Eris nodded and announced she was prepared for the worst. Ruijerd asked Rudius if he agreed to leave his father behind despite the possibility of not meeting again, and Rudius told him he had other relatives he might not see if he did not look for them. Paul smiled and agreed with his son's words. The next day, Rudius said goodbye to his father and Norn and began their journey home. After his son left, Paul ordered his team to prepare the others for a meeting. After they left Millis, a random fighter stood in front of them and requested a quick duel with Ruijerd. After an easy battle, the defeated man took a Ruijerd figurine as a charm. In the next scene, the three were traveling on a boat in a rainstorm. Rudius and Eris suffered from seasickness, while Ruijerd sat patiently reading a large newspaper. Rudius expressed his relief that Ruijerd could travel with them thanks to his father and that they finally reached the central continent, but Ruijerd told him the road was still long. On the demon continent, Roxy spoke with Nokopara the demon, whom Ruijerd threatened to shut his mouth. After some discussions, Nokopara told her about his meeting with the trio team called Dead End 2 years ago. Roxy started moving nervously when she heard their name. After a while, she composed herself when Nokopara asked her about her family, and when he saw her reaction, he asked why she hadn't gone to visit her parents for a long time and advised her to return home, but Roxy refused. In the next scene, Roxy entered her village and began noticing the changes that had happened so far. While walking in the village, two demons used telepathy with her, but she apologized because she did not understand. Roxy remembered how much she hated the village when those two looked at her with the gaze for strangers. She walked after the sound of children and found them playing as she traced the scratches she had written on a stone when she was little. Roxy heard the sound of a child falling and ran to him to heal him, and when the mother entered the scene, she ran at top speed and hid behind a random building. Roxy observed her house and said spontaneously that she arrived. Her father ran to her and tried to hug her but stopped halfway. Her father was excited and asked her about her journey, telling them they heard about her from guests in the village years ago. Roxy chose not to recount her journey, and her mother expressed her joy at her daughter's arrival. The two tried to convince her to stay as long as she liked before leaving, but Roxy said she would leave immediately. Her mother begged her to stay at least a night, but Roxy told them she stopped in the village only on the way to a mission. Her father asked when she would visit them again, and Roxy told him she did not know and probably would not return to the village again. Her mother held her hand and asked her to visit them at least once every 20 years, but Roxy promised to visit them after 50 years. Roxy was shocked when her mother burst into tears and looked around the house, remembering days when she was little. Roxy remembered the first moment she noticed she could not communicate by telepathy like the other children. She tried to stop herself from crying while seeing her mother crying, but failed and shed free tears. She hugged her mother and apologized for leaving them without telling them. After a while, her father joined them, and they all cried for the joy of reuniting. In the morning after breakfast, Roxy announced she would leave and apologized for that, explaining she had a mission she must complete. Her father told her about a boy who came and said he was her student and tried to remember his name. Her mother helped him and told him his name was Rudius. Roxy was astonished and asked her mother to tell her the story. Her mother told her about the visit, and her father added that the Superd traveling with him was a nice man, and contrary to their expectations of Superds. In the next scene, Roxy and her parents said goodbye to each other. Her mother told her to bring Rudius with her next time, but her father understood what the two women meant and forbade his daughter strictly from bringing the boy to the city. Roxy deduced that the famous trio calling themselves Dead End were Rudius and his party. While traveling on a huge monster, Roxy and Alinalise argued about the previous incident and Alinalise's strange habit, and their third companion asked them where they were going next. Roxy said they would go to the northwest of the demon continent to find the rest of Paul's family. Rudius woke up from his euphoria and went to strengthen his stomach by the sea. In the capital and on the carriage, Eris was dazzled by the residents and buildings. Rudius thought about what he was told and wondered why Roxy did not see them while she was in the same city all the time. He announced he obtained information about his former maid and her daughter and asked them to help him gather information. Finally, in the next scene, Rudius wrote a letter to Roxy and handed it to the post in the city and tried to find a place resembling what he saw with his demon eye. He felt someone following him, and after ruling out suspects, he took random paths and found himself in a familiar place. Behind the stone wall he made to hide, he heard the scream of a small girl being bullied. He merged the wall and faced two guards and a small girl. One of the guards said they were soldiers wanting to return the lost girl home, and the girl was crying about the theft of her letter. Rudius stood next to the girl and dealt with the guards. In the evening, the soldiers surrounded the alleys, but Rudius and Aisha escaped easily. Afterward, Aisha introduced herself with a smile and asked him to return the greeting, and Rudius introduced himself as a sword knight, member of Dead End, and known as the Kennel Master. Aisha confessed innocently that her mother was imprisoned and wanted to send a letter to her father, but the people in the palace were not letting her. Rudius asked her if her mother had any acquaintances, and Aisha described her brother and accused him of being a pervert. Rudius felt embarrassed and understood the reason for the white figure's advice not to reveal his identity. Rudius reassured her that he would free her mother at night. He covered for himself and told his companions to call him Kennel Master because she was misled. Eris and Ruijerd announced their readiness to save Lilia, but Rudius said to wait until he heard from his teacher Roxy. The next morning, Rudius was approached by a guard of the 7th Prince of Sharon, who told him Roxy was asking for him at the palace. He gathered his things quickly and reassured his companions he would return quickly if any danger occurred. The guard took him to the palace and praised him because of the kind words Roxy said about him. The guard hesitated a bit, but announced the presence of Roxy and Rudius. Rudius frowned when he understood he was betrayed and met the 7th Prince of Sharon. He saw Lilia tied on the floor next to the prince's chair and demanded to know where Roxy was and what was happening. Before he could reply, the floor beneath him moved and he fell into a tight magical trap. The prince laughed madly and explained to him that the magic circle was a king-tier barrier he designed to catch Roxy. Rudius accepted his fate calmly and apologized for the previous day, asking him to call Roxy. But Pax said that Roxy's location was unknown and he intended to use him as bait to force her to be his slave and bear him 5 heirs. When Rudius tried to ask him, the prince said wickedly that he intended to rape Roxy in front of him. Rudius asked him how he expected Roxy to know he was captured and advised him to spread the news or allow them to ask for help because otherwise no one would know. The prince mocked him and told him he could not get himself out and closed the trap. Rudius heard the prince's voice complaining and threatening the guards because he could not find Aisha. He reviewed what he did according to the human god's instructions and wondered if they misled him again. Before the light hit the man of the calamity, Paul, his family, and Sylph saw a strong light coming toward them. Before the collision, Lilia ran to hug her daughter Aisha. In the next scene, Lilia woke up on the banks of a deep river. The mother and daughter walked on foot to the nearby kingdom of Sharon. Lilia remembered that Roxy was a royal magician tutoring the princes and went to the palace to ask for her protection. When she arrived at the gate, she told the guards she wanted to meet Roxy Magurdia who lived there. The guard tried to stop her, but the 7th Prince Pax heard the conversation and gave the guard his order and decided to imprison the 2 girls. Rudius was lying on the basement floor feeling despair, but after a while, he stood up and tried to undo the magic trapping him, but all his attempts failed again. In the end, he gave up and hoped that Ruijerd and Eris would save him. At that moment, the basement door opened and a strange man with a strange appearance and hair like the 7th Prince descended the ladder in a terrifying way. He faced Rudius and told him he was Zenoba Shironi, the 3rd Prince of Shironi. Rudius introduced himself politely and said, "I am Rudius Greyrat." To his surprise, Zenoba showed him a figurine of Ruijerd and asked him where he got a figurine perfected in such detail. Rudius was skeptical and afraid to tell the truth, so the figurine would not be considered. So he told the prince he got it by chance while traveling on the demon continent. The prince pressed him to reveal its source, but Rudius anxiously said he did not know. Zenoba took out a second figurine of Roxy and asked him if he recognized it, saying the figurine was seen in the market 4 years ago. Rudius recognized the figurine and said it was the one he made and sold years ago. The prince explained that his brother bought it from a traveling merchant when Roxy was the royal magician. Rudius was surprised when he used the past tense. The prince mentioned that Roxy ran away years ago because of his brother's excessive harassment. Zenoba changed the subject and began praising the figurine's details, and Rudius felt validated by someone who appreciated him. Rudius noticed the mole on the figurine was missing and asked what happened. Zenoba told him he removed it. Rudius explained the importance of the mole, and Zenoba got very angry. Rudius offered to fix it, and Zenoba bowed and promised he would be loyal to him. In the next scene, the royal guards were holding a secret meeting with Ruijerd, Eris, and Aisha. The guards updated them on the latest news of the killer. Rudius asked them to save their families. Ruijerd asked what they wanted to say. One guard explained that the 7th prince kidnapped their families to control the soldiers of the garrison. Ruijerd told Eris to stay back and watch Aisha while he solved the problem. Rudius watched the scene unfold before him and agreed to take Zenoba as a disciple on the condition that he find a way to free him. One of the guards received urgent news about assistance in the dungeon. Aisha asked what was happening, and Aisha spoke firmly about the devices used to detain someone when they lose control, explaining that these blessed children were people born with special abilities, and that the one before them possessed terrible power since birth and crushed his little brother's head when he was 3 years old. Eris announced that she wanted to fight someone that strong one day. The guards asked the 3rd prince to calm his brother down, and when Eris asked about the tall prince, Aisha told her he was the blessed child. Behind the prince who was cutting heads in the dungeon, the guards and the others saw Zenoba pressing and lifting his brother's head, threatening to decapitate Pax if he did not free Rudius. But Pax stood firm and threatened his guards to come to save him. Eris announced that Ruijerd went to save their families, so the guards drew their swords and watched the 3rd prince dealing with the 7th prince, who was on the verge of death. Pax surrendered and promised to free Rudius from the magic. Zenoba put Pax down and twisted his left arm as a warning. In the morning, Ruijerd gathered with the guards' families, and Rudius learned that Ginger, the guard who invited him to the tower, was the one who showed Zenoba the figurine, took it from him, and planned everything. Lilia and her daughter said goodbye to Rudius and his companions. Lilia handed Rudius a box containing clothes for Roxy and a gift Sylph had left for him on his 10th birthday. She hugged him from behind, wished him a happy belated birthday, and disappeared. Quickly, when she heard her daughter's voice, Aisha asked him to allow her to accompany him on the journey, saying her mother wanted her to serve her half-brother when she grew up, but she wanted to save herself from serving a perverted human. Rudius removed his forehead protector and gave it to Aisha to keep as a remembrance, telling her this was like when her big brother held a girl's panties. Aisha understood and thanked him seriously. Rudius and his companions said goodbye to Lilia and Aisha. Aisha surprised them and apologized to Rudius for saying he was a pervert. In the Sharon Palace, Pax and Zenoba were expelled from the kingdom under the pretext of studying abroad as punishment. Rudius thought about the past and his previous life, looked at his killer, and accepted life. In the next scene, Rudius and his companions were traveling in the snow and stopped at a small shop to spend the night. Eris went crazy over the beauty of the red dragons in the sky. After a while, Ruijerd asked her if she considered being a warrior after she fought with them. A little. The next day, the three continued their journey on a violently snowy mountain. Eris saw a group of red dragons and pulled Rudius, who was scared, to the edge to see them, saying she wanted to fight one of them. But Ruijerd told them dragons were very strong and moved in groups. Ruijerd and Eris stopped suddenly and saw a tough-looking man and a woman with a scary face walking side by side. Rudius watched them when they stopped suddenly. Ruijerd warned him, and Eris said not to move. The bull they were walking with got agitated and fell off the cliff. The man called the names of Rudius's companions and asked who he was. Ruijerd and Eris, without looking back, asked the man how he knew their names, but he ignored them. Rudius, without fear, asked him to wait and introduced himself as Rudius Greyrat, asking him to introduce himself. The man said he was Orsted. Rudius asked him how he knew his companions. Orsted told him he had not met them yet. Rudius was confused, and Orsted asked him which branch of the Greyrats he belonged to. Rudius told him he was from Paul Greyrat. Orsted said Paul was supposed to have only 2 daughters and started walking toward them. Rudius noticed he was comfortable looking into his eyes and asked what he wanted from him. Rudius simply asked how he knew about the mana calamity and apologized for bothering him. Orsted told him the man whom he killed was the evil dragon who possessed high virtue like him, and he could not see anything related to the dragon because of the curse on him. He explained more about a group called the Cursed Children, saying they consisted of Orsted and 3 others, noting that Orsted had a curse that made all creatures in their world fear or hate him. Rudius asked why he did not feel anything toward him, and he explained that the reason was he came from another world and faced a similar situation with Ruijerd. Rudius asked if Ruijerd was one of the Cursed Children, but he said that Laplace transferred the curse to the spears he gave to the warriors during the war. Rudius accused him of giving them false hope, but he told him that the great curse was close to disappearing, and the one on Ruijerd was disappearing quickly after he shaved his hair because Laplace had green hair. When Rudius asked if they could defeat Orsted, he was told that Orsted was the strongest among the 7, even with the curses shackling his power, and even if he fought the number 1 of the 7, he would win. Rudius Rudius complained about his sudden death, but he sat listening to the fact he was not dead. Rudius asked how he was alive, and Eris told him that the masked woman Nanahoshi said something to Orsted that made him cast a healing spell on him. Eris burst into tears, fearing she almost lost her friend. Rudius woke up from a strange dream and unintelligible. Ruijerd asked if he was okay and asked about the human. Rudius told him that they said the bad reputation of the Superd was caused by the curse transferred to the spears. Ruijerd quietly explained that Rudius was wasting his time trying to fix the Superd's image, but Rudius told him the curse was fading and had been disappearing since he shaved his hair, adding that they told him he could clear his name through hard work and put people at ease. Ruijerd turned away, covering his teary eyes, and Rudius excused himself, apologized, and pretended to sleep, so Ruijerd would feel comfortable and could shed his tears of relief and joy. The next day, the three continued their journey to Asura, their homeland. Rudius walked through the ruins of his old house, recalling memories, and walked to the withered tree where he and Sylph used to play. Ruijerd and Eris reached him, and after some talking, Ruijerd announced they no longer needed a guardian and prepared to leave, thanking Rudius for helping him discover that he had more options than he thought. Ruijerd bowed, took out the figurine Rudius made for him, and summarized his journey with them. Rudius mentioned that he did all the good deeds alone, but Ruijerd insisted it was thanks to him he achieved them all. He faced Eris, who acted like she did not care. Ruijerd praised her, saying she had talent stronger than his. Ruijerd put his hand on their heads one last time, and Eris burst into tears. Afterward, Ruijerd tried to return the pendant he gave him, but Rudius told him to keep it. Ruijerd bade them farewell, and walked away while the children watched him with sad faces. Rudius and Eris rode their horse toward the refugee camp, and Eris saw Ghislaine in the camp and ran to hug her. Eris and Rudius met with Ghislaine and the steward asked Rudius to give them a moment, but Eris insisted Rudius stay in the tent. The steward told Eris sadly about her grandfather, father, and mother. Eris held Rudius's hand with all her strength and asked if their deaths were confirmed. The steward explained that Ghislaine confirmed her parents were transported together and died in a conflict zone, and her grandfather was executed for bearing responsibility for the calamity. Rudius tried to object, but Eris asked him to calm down and asked what would happen next. The steward told her that Lord Pilimon Notos. Eris asked to be left alone, and they all respected her decision. Rudius, who was the last to leave, felt sad when he heard Eris crying in the tent. Rudius saw Ghislaine cross out his name and Eris's name from the list on the bulletin, bored, and said sadly that his mother was not found. Rudius noticed a name missing from the death list and felt relieved. In his temporary room, he saw a letter on the table. Rudius read the letter. Eris wrote about her journey. He ran to ask the steward, Alphonse, about her whereabouts. Alphonse told him she left with Ghislaine and was ordered not to say anything else. Rudius walked from the camp with tears flowing. At dawn, Eris and Ghislaine continued their journey after stopping for a night, and in the refugee camp, people were happily planting crops while Rudius lay exhausted in his bed. Rudius thought about the past when he was bullied in school. They beat him and stripped him in front of the whole school, and he felt miserable all his previous life. Alphonse entered his makeshift tent and tried to get him out of bed, saying he had something to help him with, but Rudius ignored him and stayed in bed. Alphonse sighed and told him he intended to report that Eris died in an accident after the displacement, but the announcement would not be now to avoid hindering reconstruction efforts. Rudius told him to leave him alone. Alphonse reminded him that tents were few and food barely sufficed, then left him. Rudius remained alone and thought what to do, falling from the bed to the floor. Meanwhile, Eris was fighting a pack of wild wolves, and Ruijerd, on his end, thanked him for defeating a large monster. When asked about himself, he introduced himself as Ruijerd, and the men were impressed that he was a Superd. Eris yelled at the top of her voice that she loved Rudius and decided to train to become strong enough to defeat the dragon god. In another scene, Zenoba was crying in his carriage, saying he hoped to meet Rudius someday. Jis was in a scorching desert in the Beast Village. The Beast Warrior was training with his daughter, and Tersena was watching. The party Rudius and his friends saved in the petrified forest was amazed to see the sea for the first time. A huge demon accused Kishirika of trying to pay without money, and when she tried to convince him, he lifted her by the wrist. Then Roxy paid Kishirika's debts and warned her not to buy anything without money. Kishirika offered to repay her debt with a demon eye, but Roxy laughed and asked her to use her eyes to search for the family of someone named Rudeus Greyrat. When she said she saw him, Roxy looked at her in amazement. In Millis, Paul reunited with Lilia and his daughter Aisha. Norn asked about her mother, and Lilia asked calmly if Zenith was still missing. Paul comforted his daughter, telling her mother was waiting, and confirmed they would come home hand in hand. Kishirika told Roxy that Paul, his maid, and the two girls were living happily in Millis. When she tried to find Zenith's location, she could determine an approximate location and said she was on the Bigaret continent in the labyrinth city of Rapin. Roxy felt relieved, knowing Zenith was alive and well, and asked about Rudius's location. Kishirika told her he was on the central continent and depressed. Rudius felt sad and sank into his dream, dreaming he was young and training with his father, and his mother Sylph and Lilia were watching him. After After training, Paul and Rudius returned to the house, sweaty and talked as a family, and Zenith said to Rudius that she loved him, and immediately he woke up to reality, and with renewed enthusiasm announced he must find his mother, Zenith. In the next scene, a group of people were evaluating Rudius's achievements, and the leader asked if all the information was correct. Sylph confirmed, and said he was her savior, teacher, and friend. In the first scene, Rudius was still sad about Eris's disappearance to the north, looking for Zenith, his mother, in a covered carriage. With him were two traveler adventurers, two women, one elderly and one about his age. The older woman asked politely why Rudius had been sighing throughout the journey, and after Rudius apologized, she asked quietly about the reason for his trip to the north, but he replied rudely and asked if there was a reason he should answer her. The other woman was annoyed by his rudeness, but the older one tried to excuse his behavior. Rudius noticed a resemblance between the small stranger and the woman who caused him heartbreak, and Eris felt guilty. Rudius admitted he was looking for his mother, a victim of the mass displacement in Rosenberg. Silence fell over the carriage, and then the small stranger started talking. The older woman, out of kindness, asked how he intended to find his mother alone when the north was so big, but Rudius, after agreeing with her point, told her he would find a way to deal with the matter. Suzanne offered to tell him about the northern lands to make his travel easier. When the travelers got off the carriage, Rudius saw his temporary travel, companions gathering again with their parties, and felt cold, complaining after renting a room for a month. Rudius remained upset about Eris's disappearance, but in the end, he tried to control himself and went to visit the Adventurers Guild in the city to hand in proof of his mission. The adventurers around him in the guild were gossiping about his party and talking about him. Rudius hesitated before finalizing his decision, but in the end, he decided to stick to his plan and choose a random quest with very good pay. One of the guild workers, out of concern for him, asked Rudius how he could survive without his party, and Rudius had a quick panic attack, but held something he was hiding in his pocket and calmed himself with it. Behind him, Suzanne, the adventurer he met while traveling, came to him and commented on his gloomy and indifferent appearance, suggesting his party collaborate with her party on the dangerous mission he chose. After many attempts to persuade him, Rudius agreed to the proposal, and they agreed to spend the rest of the day preparing and meet at the northern gate in the morning. Rudius, without being too obvious, watched the small adventurer as she expressed her unwillingness to cooperate with him, and internally he noticed how much she resembled Eris from the previous day. The next morning, the group gathered at the northern gate to discuss the battle plan. Suzanne praised Rudius because he arrived early, but he replied telling her he woke up early from bed. Rudius introduced himself to the group and announced he could cast spells without words. The rest of the group, except the small adventurer, were impressed by the presence of a young man who could cast spells without words. As they walked to the mission location, Rudius learned that Suzanne was the sub-leader, responsible for coordination but could not give orders. After a while, each member of the party introduced themselves, their abilities, and their preferred position in battle. Sarah, the small adventurer, announced. She did not want him to work with them, but Suzanne warned her, saying that one day she might separate from them and work with other adventurers. Sarah was saddened and asked if the group could split up, and Suzanne told her that was a big possibility. When Sarah and Suzanne walked away, Rudius imagined Eris and Ghislaine in their place. When night came, the group decided to make camp before going to hunt the monsters they were assigned to defeat in the mission. Suzanne alerted the party and Rudius to draw a plan for the attack. Rudius, because his role was very small, suggested taking other roles, but Sarah criticized him and pointed out every flaw in every suggestion he made, reminding him he was not one of them. Suzanne warned her not to ruin the atmosphere before they started fighting. In the next scene, Timothy, one of the party members, came and apologized for Sarah's behavior, who was unwelcoming to him, and praised Rudius's ability to cast spells without words. But Rudius downplayed his ability. Then the group saw a herd of monsters sleeping in a ditch and started the first attack. After a few simple moves, they succeeded in defeating the herd, and Suzanne spoke about the ease of the mission. Rudius felt a strange vibration in the ground and bent down to check, immediately telling them they were under attack by a massive group of predatory monsters that woke up and surprised them. Rudius hesitated at first, but after seeing the rest of the party members fighting and protecting each other, despite clearly losing, he focused his mind and decided to fight the last wave of monsters. And with one massive spell, he wiped out all the monsters. After gathering the monster hides as proof of completing the mission, the group burned the remains and decided to return home. Before starting the journey, Rudius thanked Suzanne for giving him a chance to work with them. Sarah came to him and told him grudgingly that they were indebted to him. At the guild, the adventurers around him criticized the new party as they walked to hand in the mission proof. To avoid criticism, Timothy offered to buy a round of drinks for everyone in the guild to celebrate their first victory and all the adventurers. We're happy with the free drinks, and Suzanne told them to welcome Rudius and the party. Rudius received this with joy. A few months passed, and Rudius, as he planned, was working as an adventurer adventurer to build a good reputation with the city people and other adventurers, his goal being for people to spread his name throughout the north until reached his mother Zenith wherever she was. In the guild, Rudius saw an arrogant party leader, boasting about the mission he chose and the missions he completed before. After the leader spoke to his team, he left the guild looking at Rudius with a side-eye. Rudius decided not to pay them much attention and continued his work. When Rudius tried to choose a mission, an adventurer thanked him for what he did for him, and another adventurer promised to inform him if he received any news about Zenith's location. Rudius succeeded in building a good and acceptable reputation over the few months, and most of the city's people knew him by the name Quagmire. He walked through the city helping the injured and people in need of assistance to shape his reputation. Sarah watched him from afar. Sarah reluctantly asked Rudius to join her party on a mission they chose, but she got annoyed and flustered when she noticed his hesitation. After Rudius apologized for his hesitation, she ignored him because she thought he was being overly polite. However, Suzanne and the others arrived at the scene, and Suzanne politely asked if Rudius was ready to join them. Rudius said he would like to join. In the next scene, the whole party with Rudius set out on the mission and admired the beauty of the Gaul ruins. Rudius internally noted that even after seeing the architecture of the demon continent, he had never seen anything like the structure of these ruins. Rudius predicted Sarah would fall when Suzanne found Snowdrake's scales. The whole party was happy, and Rudius internally noted how easy their mission to collect all the scales was. Suzanne gave them instructions, and they began collecting the scales while Rudius kept watch for monsters and saw a statue of Kishirika Kishirisu, the great emperor of the demon world. Rudius warned the party of the arrival of Snowdrake monsters and told them to run while he stood in their path. After all the tricks he tried failed, he turned to ask for help from the party, but he smiled slightly when he discovered he was the only one left there, but the others suddenly appeared from unexpected places. Then the party joined Rudius in fighting the Snowdrake monsters, and Rudius smiled, realizing they came back for him. While they were fighting the monsters, a blonde man, dressed in green with an evil smile on his face, interrupted the scene with his party and destroyed the monsters with just a few stabs. After the blonde man and his party finished off the Snowdrakes, Timothy from Suzanne's party tried to introduce himself to the blonde man and introduce the party, but the blonde man punched him hard in the face and accused them of showing friendliness after trying to take his mission. Suzanne confidently told him they did not know he had chosen the mission, but the blonde man announced angrily that he had announced the mission in front of the guild. Rudius remembered that he was the same arrogant party leader who boasted about the mission he chose in the guild, and with a trembling voice told Suzanne that the blonde man mentioned something about eliminating the spread of drakes in Elworm's cave before that in the guild hall. Suzanne said that Elworm's cave was a day's travel from the ruins they were in, but Timothy calmed the whole party, who had entered a defensive stance. Rudius understood that the depths of Elworm's cave and the ruins were connected in some way, which explained the presence of the snowdrakes there. Timothy apologized to the blonde man for not knowing he had chosen the mission. The blonde man clicked his tongue and then reluctantly apologized for hitting him, announcing that the snowdrakes were his party's prey, and he was willing to give them one of the corpses. But Timothy agreed and urged his party and Rudius to collect the loot and celebrate when they returned to the city. Sarah asked Rudius to celebrate with them, and he agreed to her request. In the next scene, the party and Rudius celebrated the mission's success. Rudius thanked them for returning for him, and Sarah enthusiastically said she wanted to repay the favor for the time he saved them before. After Suzanne revealed she was the first one to run to help him, the whole party discussed the arrogant leader they met in the ruins, and Rudius wondered if his father Paul was like that when he was young. At that moment, the blonde man entered the bar drunk with his friend and came to their table to harass them. He accused Timothy of always smiling like a fool and being very passive. Timothy agreed and said he would keep his word. The man laughed and looked at Rudius, accusing him of being the worst one, and asked him why he always cared about people's opinion of him. When Rudius smiled, the blonde man said bitterly that his smile disgusted him. The blonde man accused Rudius of always looking down on people and got angry, asking Rudius who he thought he was. His friend tried to calm him down, but he pulled away violently and accused Rudius of thinking no one had suffered like him, saying he could not face what he went through and that he hated cowards. Rudius apologized and said he did not want to be a nuisance and would try to avoid his gaze. The blonde man broke the table, grabbed Rudius by his collar, accused him of mockery, and asked what he would get in exchange for refusing money to build his name and reputation when everyone needed money to survive. His friend pulled him out of the bar while he continued to lash out at Rudius bitterly. After a while, the blonde man entered the Adventurers Guild, saw Rudius sitting alone, approached him, and told him he was waiting for scraps and a chance halfway through life. After the man walked away, Rudius noticed Suzanne and her party coming from the blizzard with sad faces. He went to them and asked what happened. One party member told him seriously that his party member's Mimir and Sarah had died. Timothy explained that Mimir died, but Sarah was separated from them, and they could not walk in the storm without dying. Rudius calmly asked where they lost her and gathered the necessary items, and cleared a path in the stormy weather, heading to the location. Walking through the forest, he remembered the blonde man's words about the halfway point in life and wondered what could make him feel better. He admitted he did not care if Sarah was alive or dead, but he wanted to achieve something. Rudius saw a herd of buffalo monsters and defeated them, remembering his problems. He saw Mimir's remains and gathered them for his companions, then burned the buffalo corpses. A tree monster tried to attack him from behind, but failed in the first attempt. Rudius saw Sarah trapped in the tree, fought the monster, and succeeded in saving her. In the cave, Rudius treated Sarah's wounds, explained why he was there, and informed her of her companion's death, then took her out of the cave. Sarah thanked Rudius for saving her, and Rudius felt he was saved and forgiven for everything he did. Sarah reunited with her party and told them about him entering the storm to save her, but Sarah defended him. Suzanne remembered herself and thanked him for his help, approaching him with tears in her eyes. She thanked him sincerely and offered to repay the favor. Rudius told her not to thank him and pointed out that they also helped him a lot and gave him a chance with them. Timothy suggested they continue helping each other, and Rudius encouraged that enthusiastically. Rudius and the party separated, and finally, Rudius told himself it was the first time in a long while he would sleep a deep and beautiful sleep. Rudius and the party celebrated another successful mission. After the night he saved Sarah, he and Suzanne's party continued to undertake more missions, and Sarah grew closer to him. While they were celebrating, Sarah told a story about how she became skilled in archery, and Rudius replied and told her about his father being a knight. The next day, Sarah appeared in a beautiful new outfit, and the two walked to the weapon shop to choose a knife. Rudius offered to pay for the knives they chose, and they continued walking in the city. In the bar, Soldat saw Rudius and the girl walking toward them. Soldat asked Rudius about the session. Rudius, disappointed, told him that nothing he asked of him worked. Elise apologized for her failure, and Rudius told her not to apologize because she tried hard. Soldat lamented the result and wondered aloud what he could do to alleviate Rudius's problem. At that moment, Elise pointed out that Rudius seemed afraid of girls and asked him if he knew one he would not be afraid of or one he was sure would not betray him. Rudius and Soldat's party went out on a mission in the snow. Rudius, responsible for surveillance, created a high rock to watch the monsters around them. The team spotted a pack of grizzly bears running toward them. Soldat drew his sword and told his party to scatter, and Rudius covered them while they defeated the bears. Suddenly, a red dragon appeared and attacked the adventurers. Soldat accused Rudius of sleeping on the job, and Rudius told him the white cloud above them prevented him from seeing the dragon coming. Soldat understood that his party could not defeat the dragon and advised them to run. Rudius offered to stand in front of the dragon while they scattered and escaped. He faced the dragon and defeated it after several spells. Soldat and his party celebrated next to the defeated dragon on the same day in the guild. A member of Soldat's party praised Rudius for defeating the red dragon, and Rudius was humble and said the dragon was injured and in its last days before he fought it. Soldat asked Rudius to officially join his party, and Rudius refused because he was still looking for his mother and planned to move to another country after, building his name in the country he was in now. At that moment, the restaurant door opened dramatically, and a woman appeared standing at the entrance, confident. She pointed at Rudius with her finger, called him Quagmire, and said she finally found him. The customers in the restaurant were surprised by Quagmire's presence among them. The strange woman sat in front of Rudius and spoke to him intimately. Rudius replied in a friendly way. She introduced herself as the famous Elinalys, a former member of Paul's party and Roxy's friend. Rudius was surprised by the name of his teacher and asked about her location, but she told him to calm down and touched his chest inappropriately. She took out a necklace from his pocket and asked him where he got it. Rudius told her he got it from his childhood friend and asked her why she asked. She took out a similar necklace of a different color and teased him. Rudius asked her politely to stop teasing, and Elinalys told him she did not laugh at men. Rudius asked her if she brought news for him, and Elinalys told him she brought good news. His mother was located in the labyrinth city of Rapan on the Begarit continent. Rudius decided to stay a while in the country he was in. Elinalys told him his mother was a labyrinth explorer too. He also learned that Elinalys and her partner met Roxy while looking for his family and formed a party with her. After a while, she handed him a sealed letter, and Rudius opened it immediately and learned that he was invited to be a special student at Renoa University by the vice principal. Elinalys read the letter aloud and explained to him the meaning of being a special student. Rudius doubted the origin of the letter, but he was happy that someone appreciated his 2 years of hard work. Rudius asked one of Soldat's party, Conrad, about his information regarding special students in magic universities. Conrad told him he left the university in his 5th year and explained that the university contacted people like Rudius who practiced strange spells or possessed a lot of mana. Rudius understood that the university might want him because he cast spells without incantations, and the invitation was likely not a scam. Conrad asked if he attended school. Before that, Rudius told him he had a private tutor and explained that he was from the high-ranking Asuran nobility. After Conrad praised him, he asked Rudius why someone like him of high status was roaming the north alone. Rudius wiped his tears, remembering his goal to pay his tuition fees before the mana calamity, and thought about his friend's whereabouts. Elenalise tried to convince him to study at the university, but Rudius chose to gather his family instead of school. Afterward, he said goodbye to Soldat and his party, and Soldat tried to show he was unaffected by Rudius's early departure, but Rudius saw through him. He thanked him for his help over the years. Rudius and Elenalise began their journey to the university, and after a long trip they saw the Ranoa kingdom from a short distance. At the university, Rudius and Elenalise arranged a meeting with the vice principal, Genus, and everyone introduced themselves formally. Genus assumed that Rudius's visit meant he was ready to enroll. Rudius confirmed this and explained he wanted to learn and achieve many things. Genus praised him for his honesty and asked him to participate in a small test with one of the best students. On the way to the testing grounds, Genus explained to him the qualities and purpose of the school. Rudius was relieved when he learned the school also allowed studying cures for curses. At the designated testing ground, he faced an opponent, a short, white-haired man like him, who cast spells without incantations. After they introduced themselves, they started the test, and Rudius defeated him easily with the help of his demon eye and noticed the atmosphere of the room. He felt guilty and pretended to be partially affected by his opponent's magic. Rudius extended his hand to help his opponent stand and noticed the softness of his fingers. After lifting him up, he vowed silently to repay him one day. After, Rudius became an official student with a uniform and began to talk more about being a special student. He discovered that students like him were exempt from tuition and sometimes lessons, and could do whatever they wanted as long as they attended classes once a month. The students were surprised by the arrival of the student council members. The princess introduced herself as the second princess of Asura and the student council president of the Ranoa Magic University. She began a speech about cooperation, peace, and harmony between different races. Rudius was impressed by her charisma and that she turned a boring lecture into an interesting speech. After the lecture, the students applauded her. Rudius thought about his failure with Fitz after embarrassing him in the test. After the assembly, Rudius entered his classroom to introduce himself and saw Zenoba, the third prince of Sharon. The blessed child ran toward him and lifted him off the ground. Wondering if Rudius had forgotten him, Rudius confirmed to him that he was his disciple and asked him to put him down. A beast girl announced she did not like the new member. Zenoba tried to explain who his master was, but the girl told Zenoba to approach Rudius. Rudius understood the situation and realized that Zenoba was being bullied despite his strange strength. Rudius introduced himself to the girl politely to avoid her. After the first encounter, the girl introduced herself as Linnea Doldia, a fifth-year student and the daughter of the chief of the Doldia village warriors in the Great Forest. Rudius remembered the warrior chief told him about his eldest child studying abroad and realized she was the other daughter. Eating dried meat, she made a rude comment. Rudius asked her who she was, and she told him her name was Persina. Rudius greeted her, and Persina replied with one word. Rudius sat behind a small boy his age with dark hair. Rudius introduced himself, and the boy introduced himself as Cliff Grimoire, a genius magician. Rudius was surprised how comfortable he was introducing himself as a genius. Cliff told him he was a second-year special student who knew combat spells, advanced in all elements, as well as healing and detoxification. He said he was a beginner in barriers, but would be intermediate soon. Rudius was impressed by the talented boy, and Cliff noted that he was a swordsman, not just a magician. Rudius confirmed this and asked Cliff how he knew about him. Cliff told him he heard from Eris. Rudius tried to ask about Eris, but Cliff ignored him. Zenoba sat next to Rudius and told him the last person to meet was Silent, who did not participate in any school activities and spent all her time in her laboratory. Rudius wandered around the university and found the huge library. He decided to take books about mass teleportation because he was told this might solve his problem. After selecting the book, he met Fitz on the way and apologized to him for what happened before. Fitz asked him why he came to the library. Rudius told him he was interested in mass teleportation because he lived in the Fitoa region of Asura until the mana calamity sent him to the demon con. Fitz smiled and showed interest. Rudius told him his journey home took 3 years, and his family was found thanks to an old friend, but one of his old friends was still missing. Fitz smiled and asked him if he enrolled in the school to look for his missing friend. Rudius lied and said it was to cure his problem. Fitz praised him, saying he was a wonderful person and advised him with a book with clearer details about teleportation. At lunch, Rudius suggested to Zenoba that they make a figurine together when he settled in. The princess's guard, Luke Nodos. Grey Rat went to Rudius and and accused him of forgetting introducing himself. Rudius was surprised that he was one of his relatives. After Luke and his party walked away, Zenoba explained to him that Luke was from the high nobility in Asura, and his real purpose was to protect the princess. Rudius asked why. The princess was studying, and Zenoba told him she lost the chance to become the regent and used studying as an excuse to escape. Rudius continued practicing with the sword early in the morning, and noticed that Fitz was also running around the school at the same time. Rudius made more figurines for Zenoba, and they had breakfast and lunch together. In the afternoon, Rudius attended basic classes in healing and barrier magic, and in his free time he studied mass teleportation in the library. But Rudius, so far, could not find anything concrete. Although he had settled in a bit, his problem was still the same and did not improve with time. Fitz and Rudius became close friends and shared their interest in researching mass teleportation. Fitz told Rudius that he also had an old friend affected by the disasters but was seen recently, and asked him if he could join him in his research on mass teleportation. Rudius agreed immediately and welcomed him officially to his team, which was now only 2 people. On the way from the library, Rudius asked Fitz why he always wore his sunglasses. Fitz told him he had personal reasons not to show his face to everyone. Rudius did not care about the answer and asked him about his room in the dorms, and was surprised that Fitz and every trusted person with permission from the school could live in the girls' dorms. He noticed Fitz's willingness to talk, which contradicted his reputation of being silent, and Fitz got nervous and said he was still very shy. On the way, Rudius asked Fitz how he learned magic without incantations, and Fitz told him about his teacher who saved him and taught him magic methods. Rudius felt his heart beating fast when he saw Fitz's smile again, and wondered why his body reacted that way whenever he was around him. After a while, Fitz told Rudius that he had worked with the Princess Ariel and left. Rudius wondered why someone like Fitz was willing to help him in his research. In his room, Zenoba pestered Rudius to teach him to make figurines, and after many attempts, Rudius reluctantly agreed. Long hours and more attempts passed, and Zenoba could not make a figurine with magic. Rudius apologized and told him he would show him how to make the figurine manually without magic. He summoned the necessary materials with silent magic and showed him how to carve the figurine manually, but Zenoba could not carve due to his superhuman strength. The next day, Rudius confided in Fitz about his failure to teach Zenoba carving, and Fitz was surprised by the possibility of making figurines with magic. Rudius showed him, but Fitz tried and failed. Fitz suggested they bring a slave to do the work for Zenoba. Rudius was happy with the idea and told him he would go with Zenoba to the slave market on the next holiday. Fitz felt nervous and worried and told Rudius he was also free on the next holiday. Rudius noticed his nervousness and asked him if he would like to join them. Fitz accepted the invitation happily and asked if he would be a nuisance. Rudius reassured him and promised to buy him food afterward. In the next scene, Fitz and Zenoba introduced themselves and began the trip to the slave market with Rudius. In a slave shop, the 3 looked for a small dwarf talented in magic. Fitz suggested choosing someone who did not know any spells yet, because learning without incantations was easier from a young age, saying that starting from age 5 increased mana capacity significantly. They decided to consult the shop owner about their preferences, and he told them their preferences were hard to get. But Rudius reassured him that the dwarf's race did not matter to them. The important thing was being clever and obedient. The shop owner told them about a 6-year-old dwarf girl whose whole family was sold into slavery to cover her father's debts, adding that she was weak and could not speak the human language. Rudius, Fitz, and Zenoba agreed and asked to see the dwarf. The shop owner took them to the girl's cage and pulled her forcefully. Fitz healed her wounds immediately, and the shop owner told them she was not the best choice. But Rudius walked to her and tried to speak with her in the demon god language. After attempts, Rudius stopped the shop owner from hitting the girl to answer. He spotted a look of despair in the girl's eyes, and Zenoba asked what was wrong. Rudius told him the girl looked despairing and wanted to die. Her eyes took him back to the time when Eris left him and he was hopeless and wanted to give up on everything. Rudius gave up, but the girl, with tears in her eyes, whispered she was not ready to die. In the next scene, the 3 gave her a decent meal. Zenoba asked Rudius the name of their new friend, and Rudius asked her, and the girl described herself with her parents' names and titles. Fitz told them dwarves did not take an official name until age 7, and they had to give her a name. Zenoba suggested naming her Julius in honor of his little brother, whom he accidentally killed before knowing his superhuman strength. Rudius modified the name and made it Julie. They all agreed on the name, and Rudius told her from now on her name was Julie, so she agreed with a smile. They agreed that Julie would live with Zenoba and wait for him all day. Rudius taught her to speak the human language and use magic without incantations little by little. Rudius and Zenoba made great progress in the carving plan. Fitz, whose name was formerly Sylph, woke up in her room wearing girl's nightwear. After she finished tidying her room and stretched, she decided to run around the streets of the Magic City to get to know the place and know the limits of her abilities. During the day, Fitz found her lessons boring and repetitive compared to to what she learned from Rudius when she was little. At night, while sleeping, she called Rudius's name and looked at what she envisioned of him, starting to realize her feelings toward him and hesitated, thinking about what to do. 1 month after Julie's arrival, Rudius assigned her training exercises. As a test, having her use one spell to start the day, and then she focused on shaping clay without words. Although Zenoba was convinced that Julie would never learn silent magic, she surprised him and was able to cast a spell after a month of training. Rudius, despite his doubts, was amazed by Zenoba and Julie's care. Rudius described Julie as his disciple and Zenoba as his junior disciple. One night, Rudius asked about the Roxy figurine Zenoba had, and Zenoba got nervous and said he left it in Sharon. Rudius saw through his lie and scolded him firmly. Zenoba confessed while trembling that he had the figurine. Rudius asked to see it, and Zenoba began opening the box slowly, breathing with difficulty. Rudius got angry when he saw the figurine broken. Zenoba explained he lost in a duel against Linnea and Persina in his first year as a special student, and everyone bet something precious to him. Zenoba begged Master Rudius for mercy. Rudius understood his sincere apology and smiled a scary smile, telling him he should have told him before introducing himself. Zenoba saw his master as terrifying and walked to the corner of his room, calmed down, and said they must teach the girls a lesson. Rudius and Zenoba confronted Linnea and Persina at the water fountain. Linnea asked strangely what their problem was, and Persina smelled their scent and told her they wanted to fight. Linnea accused Zenoba of being petty and dragging out the problem, but Zenoba ignored her. Linnea threatened to break the second figurine, and Zenoba offered to face them, but Rudius stopped him with a smile. Rudius told him he should be ashamed of his behavior. It should be the girls who always attacked people and announced to the public that they could not do anything alone. Linnea got annoyed and accused the new Rudius of being arrogant, threatening him with words and promising his death. After focusing, she tried to drive them away. Rudius mocked her because she always added meow to her words and accused her race of being unable to speak the human language well. Linnea reached the limit of her patience. Linnea threatened to end him and started her first attack, but Rudius ordered Julie to go after Persina while using his demon eye to predict her movements and defeat her easily. The next day, after leaving his room, Fitz apologized for her recklessness and said her threat was empty and there was no such thing as making the drawing on their faces permanent, and that she bought cheap paints just to draw on magic circles. After a while, Rudius saw a box and asked about its content. The next day in class, Cliff exaggerated his reaction to the voices of Linnea and Persina as they faced themselves, and the whole class went silent. Rudius apologized quietly, ordering them all to lower their voices. While walking in the hallway, Rudius saw a group of thugs wanting to beat Cliff. He went and asked them what they were doing, and when they knew Quagmire was there, they walked away immediately. Cliff stood and tried to scold Rudius for his help, but after a while, he thanked him for the help and walked away. Rudius watched him, wondering why Cliff hated him in the beginning, but decided not to think about it. Afterward, Cliff called Rudius to talk to him and confessed nervously that there was a girl he liked. Rudius thought if he intended to ask him to deliver a love letter or practice asking her out himself. But when Cliff pointed to the girl, Rudius was shocked to see who the girl was, whom he claimed was the queen of his heart. Cliff grabbed Rudius by his shirt collar and complained to him how wonderful and smart the girl was, and after letting go, explained that the thugs he saw earlier were spreading rumors that she would go with any boy in the school. Rudius thought to himself that the thugs were telling the truth and asked Cliff why he was revealing his feelings to him. Cliff asked awkwardly if Rudius could introduce him to Ellenelise. Rudius confided in fits about the situation with Cliff. Not knowing she was Silk, she asked Rudius about his feelings toward the girl, and he told her he had no romantic feelings for her and did not intend to be with her. Fitz told him just because he did not like her romantically did not mean Cliff would not love her, confirming she also loved someone and understood Cliff's feeling. Rudius tried to know who was on her mind and concluded that it might be the second princess. Fitz advised him it was hard to be close to someone one loved and unable to express one's feelings, encouraging him to give the two a chance. Rudius introduced Ellenelise to Cliff. Ellenelise asked Cliff about the reason he came to her. Rudius announced that Cliff wanted to know her personally. Ellenelise pulled Rudius aside and asked him about what he did with Cliff. Rudius told her Cliff asked him to introduce him to her. Ellenelise reminded him of her curse that she could not commit to one partner. Rudius suggested she reject him politely and honestly, and Ellenelise agreed. She advised him to leave them alone, and Cliff thanked Rudius and focused on the girl of his dreams. The next day, Rudius entered the class and saw Ellenelise with Cliff flirting with each other. Ellenelise announced they agreed to be together and said she was ready to control her desires for Cliff. Rudius approved their decision and thought when he could cure himself and start doing what he wanted. In the autumn season, Rudius discovered the two Beast Girls and got into fights, understanding that one could call these duels their version of a marriage proposal. Rudius received a letter from the girls telling him about their absence from the girls' dorm during the proposal period. In the letter, they mentioned that the rest of the procedures were up to Rudius. Later, while While walking in the school hallway, a beastkin stopped him and requested a formal duel, saying he wrote to Persina, and she told him Rudius was her group leader. He explained to him that the tradition among beastkin was that whoever wanted to marry must challenge the group leader and defeat him. Rudius defeated the man easily and walked away calmly. After a while, Fitz asked Rudius about the commotion outside the library, and Rudius explained to her that anyone who wanted to marry Linnea or Persina had to defeat him. First, Fitz noticed a girl among the men outside, but was disappointed when she heard Rudius's sick response. Outside the library, Rudius and Fitz were shocked when they saw all the beastkin knocked unconscious on the ground. Rudius saw a demon throwing the last beastkin with his hand, and the demon told him that his fiancée Kishirika Kishirisu, the great emperor of the demon world, spoke about him. The demon introduced himself as the Demon King Badigadi and announced that the purpose of his visit was to challenge Rudius to a duel. In the next scene, the students formed a circle in the courtyard, waiting for Rudius's staff to arrive. The demon praised Rudius greatly, and Rudius humbly rejected his exaggerations. The two opponents about to compete sat talking about Rudius's mana capacity and that he might be one of the strongest people in the world. Rudius politely asked if he knew anything about the human god, and Badigadi asked him angrily how he knew. Rudius explained to him that he saw him in his dreams, and the demon refused to answer further, saying he knew nothing about the matter. Fitz ran into the battle circle and handed Rudius his staff, apologizing for the delay. The beastkin agreed to launch their strongest attack against Badigadi. With one attack, Rudius won the duel. After the battle, the demon praised him for his strength and told him he could call himself a hero, but Rudius politely declined the offer. Afterward, he was lifted in the air with joy, and the demon announced he would return the blow someday and punched him in the face. In the dorm, Rudius thanked Fitz for helping him heal the swollen face, caused by Badigadi's fist. The next day, Badigadi appeared in the class disguised as a student and announced his arrival with hysterical laughter. The princess and her escorts passed through the school hallway, and when they saw Rudius and Persina fighting over dried meat, Fitz noticed Rudius and thought, is this the kind of love he could like? In the student council meeting, Ariel and Luke, who knew Fitz's identity completely, asked her about her strange behavior when she was around Rudius. After confirming he forgot she was his friend before, Fitz surprised them and said she was still too shy to reveal her identity and feared Rudius's reaction if she told him. The princess called Fitz by her real name, Sylphie, and told her she trusted she knew how to handle the situation at her own pace. Rudius learned more about mass teleportation and saw the similarity between it and summoning, likening them to each other. He also discovered it was impossible for him to summon people. Rudius went to Fitz and asked her if she knew any summoning expert, and she told him about a special student named Silent 7 Star. Rudius recognized her name and her various works in improving the school. After thinking, Rudius agreed to visit the summoning expert in the laboratory. Rudius recognized Silent 7 Star as the girl who wore a mask and whom he saw while traveling with the dragon god. She welcomed him warmly, but Rudius fell into a panic attack, remembering the feeling of the dragon god's hand piercing his chest. He tried to run quickly, despite the panic attack, but he fell unconscious. Rudius asked nervously if Orsted intended to kill him again. The girl wearing a mask told him Orsted did not intend to kill him. Fitz asked her how she knew, and the girl, holding the mask, admitted she knew him. When Fitz asked why Rudius was afraid of her presence, she told him that his friend must have remembered what the dragon god did to him. The girl holding the mask approached Rudius and said she would ask him 3 questions, and he must answer honestly. She took out a paper with 2 names written in Japanese and asked him if he knew them. Rudius admitted he did not know the names, but the girl confirmed he understood the language. When Fitz asked what language it was, she told them it meant they came from the same place. She removed the mask from her face, and Rudius immediately recognized her as the girl he saved from the truck accident before he died. The girl introduced herself in Japanese as Nanahoshi Shizuka and asked strangely who Rudius was, happy when she was right. Then she asked about his name, and Rudius introduced himself as Rudius Greyrat, but she tried to know his real name in his previous life and stopped halfway because she wanted to gain his trust first, confirming she was on his side. She suggested they work together to return to their world, but Rudius told her he did not intend to return to the old world. Fitz begged Rudius and Nanahoshi to speak in a language she understood, but Nanahoshi did not care and continued in Japanese. She told Rudius she did not intend to stay in an unknown country forever. Rudius told her he also came from the same world but arrived as a small child and had new friends and family. Nanahoshi told him she was different because she was transported to this world suddenly and showed him how she found herself in the strange world. Rudius told her he arrived after a traffic accident. She explained that after the teleportation, she she met Orsted, who decided to take her with him and said she spent 2 years learning the language, reading, and writing. And after that, she and Orsted traveled around the world in 1 year. Rudeus asked why Orsted and the human god were at war, but she told him she did not know the reason. Rudeus asked how they managed to travel around the world in a year, and she told him they used a special method. She asked if he knew about the existence of teleportation circles, and Rudeus told her he only knew the name and had never seen one before. Thinking they had disappeared, Nanahoshi told him the circles still existed, and some were in ruins from the human-demon wars. He asked about the locations of the circles, but she told him she was not allowed to reveal them. She told him a certain person she met on her journey said she was summoned to a new world. Rudeus asked who that person was, but she told him she was not allowed to reveal the identity. Nanahoshi explained to him that any attempt to change history, the world would erase their existence, and confirmed that he had mana, and she did not. She told him she had been in the strange world for 5 years and did not age, asking if her words made him trust her more. She proposed a deal and asked if he had anything to hold on to from their world, and Rudeus told her no. She offered to give him answers if he agreed to help her with her experiments. Fitz sat in the corner, feeling neglected and sad. Rudeus agreed to Nanahoshi's condition and decided to help her as agreed. She asked Rudeus what he wanted to know about mass teleportation, and Rudeus informed Fitz in the demon god language that Nanahoshi would give them answers about the teleportation. He encouraged Nanahoshi to speak in the human language, and she agreed. Nanahoshi explained that the mass teleportation was likely the result of a reaction to her arrival, and Rudeus was relieved to know he was not the cause of the calamity. Fitz, who did not understand the situation, attacked her violently and accused her of being the cause of the calamity. Rudeus calmed her down and explained to her that Nanahoshi was also a victim and did not intend to cause any harm. Nanahoshi apologized because she was not focused on her words, and Fitz apologized for her attack. Nanahoshi admitted she still did not understand the cause of the calamity. Rudeus asked if Orsted told her anything, but she said no, and all he told her was that nothing happened. Rudeus asked how they knew she was the cause of the mana flow, and Nanahoshi said she had ideas that might clarify the cause of the mass teleportation. If her experiment succeeded, Rudeus decided to rest and digest the information she gave him. On their way to the dorm, Fitz asked Rudeus his opinion of Nanahoshi, and he told her that although it was a bit annoying, there was no solution but to trust her temporarily. As time passed, Fitz began to worry about Rudeus's closeness to Nanahoshi and felt she was not as important to him as before because he was giving all his time to the masked girl. 1 year after his enrollment, Rudeus organized a daily routine as a student. He noticed people were afraid of him since the day he won the duel against the Demon King Badigadi. In the hallway, Linnea and Persina came and fought over who would be responsible next among his disciples. In class, Cliff asked Rudeus if he knew anything about curses, and Rudeus told him the story of Laplace transferring his curse to the spears he gave to the Superds. Cliff thanked Rudeus earnestly because he made him understand an important point. At lunch, Rudeus, Zenoba, and Julie sat at a random table, and some students remembered the moment Rudeus defeated the Demon King. In Nanahoshi's laboratory, Rudeus and Silent Seven Star found no evidence, and succeeded in experiments to extract a person from their world. Rudeus asked if summoning another person from their world would lead to the same disaster, and Nanahoshi reassured him. She did not intend for that to happen. She explained that if he could prove 2 theories about the teleportation circle, he could hypothesize the cause of the calamity. Rudeus announced he wanted to learn about summoning, and Nanahoshi promised him she would reveal information if the experiment succeeded. When he argued with her, she reminded him that after she traveled home, he would receive her results later. She threw him a book about summoning, and Rudeus asked him to do his research. Rudeus spent his nights teaching Julie how to make figurines with silent magic. Although Julie's mana capacity was not enough at all, she was very clever, whether using magic or not. Rudeus noticed he was spending more time in the laboratory than in the library with Fitz. One day, Rudeus received a letter from Soldat informing him he was in Sharia for a cleaning meeting and invited him and Alinalize to a restaurant to reminisce about old times. In the restaurant, Rudeus and the others talked and joked about everything. Soldat was surprised to see Alinalize in a committed relationship and mocked her old habits. After a while passed, Conrad informed his boss that he must attend a meeting. Soldat was unwilling to leave, but promised to meet Rudeus again. Alinalize invited him to join her in teaching Cliff, adventuring quickly, but Cliff said he did not need help. Rudeus, while walking in the market, Rudeus saw Luke standing next to Fitz and went to greet them. Rudeus greeted them, but Luke entered a defensive stance when he tried to speak to Fitz. Fitz ignored him nervously. Luke blocked his view and asked Rudeus if he needed anything. Rudeus wondered if he came at the wrong time and explained he saw them while walking and thought to greet them. Luke thanked him for his gesture and told him Fitz was not allowed to speak while on duty. Rudeus worried a little, but walked away calmly on his way to the dorm. He thought about what he did for Fitz to treat him so coldly. He felt he needed to talk to someone, but found no one to listen, remembering that the only person who listened listened well was Fitz. After wondering for a while, he decided to busy himself reading in the library. He saw Fitz sitting reading a book in the place where they always sat. Fitz noticed his presence and greeted him joyfully. Rudius was confused seeing Fitz, with her usual cheerful personality. Seeing the confused look on his face, she asked him if something was wrong. Rudius asked anxiously why she ignored him earlier. In the market, Fitz explained to him that with her childish voice, she was not allowed to speak in public places, especially while guarding the princess. Rudius told her that. The princess was not there, but she told him Princess Ariel was in a nearby shop and they were not her only protection. Rudius apologized for talking to her at an inappropriate time, and Fitz apologized for not being able to reply to him. Despite Fitz's explanation, Rudius confirmed to himself that the princess was disguised as Fitz and avoided talking to him because any chat might reveal her identity. Rudius smiled and admitted he was worried before that she would hate him, but Fitz laughed and asked him why he thought that. On his way to class, he saw Luke waiting for him and greeted him formally. Luke asked to talk about Fitz, and Rudius insisted he did not know anything about her. Luke tried to pressure him to know the truth about Fitz, but Rudius told him he did not intend to oppose anyone and confirmed he did not know anything about her identity, announcing he cut his ties with the Boreas and Notos, and asking him to leave the matter as it was. Princess Ariel requested Fitz's presence in the official student council office and told her about the rumors. She gathered from her spies about the market and library situation, asking Sylph or Fitz what she intended to do. After Rudius discovered she was a girl, she told her there was no problem winning Rudius's heart little by little. In the next scene, Luke asked Sylph if she had any other memorable memories she and Rudius shared. The next day, Sylph went to Rudius at lunchtime and asked him to go to a quiet place to talk. After they reached a quiet place, she asked him for a favor without explaining first. Rudius immediately agreed to help her. She explained to him that the princess was annoyed because another noble boasted about his guard, saying his guard could fetch a rare flower found in a glacial forest with a party of 4 people. Rudius recognized the flower she was talking about, and Sylph said the princess replied and boasted that he could do it with a smaller party. Rudius suggested asking adventurers if they knew a way to get the flowers, but Sylph rejected the idea shyly. When Rudius tried to suggest other solutions, Sylph hinted in a way that she wanted them to complete the mission together. Rudius smiled and agreed to join her in searching for the rare flower. While walking in the frozen forest, Sylph asked if she should pay him for his services, but he told her he was doing this as a favor to her. As they walked in the forest, Sylph asked about Rudius's royal staff, and Rudius told her it was presented to him on his 10th birthday by a noble girl. Sylph showed interest in it and asked if she could hold it for a bit, commenting on the thickness of the staff and asking if it was made to be held with 2 hands. Rudius told her it was designed for him to use even after he grew up. Sylph thought to herself that her plan was going perfectly so far, and after looking at it, she told him she had loved him for a long time and wanted to stay with him forever. Rudius looked into her eyes and was surprised he did not recognize her before, thinking his impression of Sylph and Fitz were opposites. He always saw Sylph crying and clinging to him. Then he thanked her for the gift she brought him on his birthday and asked her why. She hid in the guise of a boy. Sylph told him the story that she saw him being taken 5 years ago and said that he killed his father afterwards, and she promised herself to become strong and able to help him, starting to study magic and train. After the rain, Sylph and Rudius walked in the frozen forest, and Sylph continued her story to him, saying that the mass teleportation took her to Ariel and Luke in the royal palace, and when she saw his name on the list of new students, she felt joy and alive again. She told him about her shock when she finally saw him, and Rudius apologized because he did not recognize her from the beginning. At night, Sylph and Rudius returned to their suites, and Sylph watched Rudius, wishing she had a cure for his problem. In the morning at the student council office, Ariel summoned Sylph and began criticizing the plan they made. Sylph corrected her and said the plan succeeded and told about Rudius's problem. Ariel laughed at Rudius, but Luke told her the matter was no joke and must be treated seriously. Luke expressed his pity for Rudius's ED. Rudius was upset, and Ariel apologized for underestimating the seriousness of the matter. Luke asked if she was ready to solve Rudius's problem, and Sylph told him she was ready to do anything to relieve him. She left and promised to return with a solution. Ariel apologized again and admitted she had several solutions for Rudius's weakness problem. Luke passed by Zenoba and the others as they argued about spells, entered the office, and saw Ariel advising Sylph on how to solve Rudius's problem. Luke downplayed the princess's idea and told Sylph she did not have the attractive figure that usually attracted gray rats. At night, Sylph knocked on Rudius's door carrying a bottle. Rudius smiled when he saw his love at the door and let her into the room with joy. Sylph said she came to spend the night with him, and Rudius asked her to sit. They talked a little about the old days, and Sylph took out the bottle Luke gave her and explained it was medicine to solve Rudius's problem. Rudius recognized the bottle and drank it. Afterward, Rudius went to pay his respects to Princess Ariel. Rudius introduced himself formally, and the princess commented on the reputation he made inside the school and asked him why he came. Rudius explained he came to pay his respects to thank her for her help to Sylph. Rudius thanked her for her contribution to finding a solution to his problem. Luke pointed out that he thought he fortified himself away from power struggles between nobles, and Rudius confirmed that he indeed protected himself away, but said he was ready to intervene if his love was involved in any conflict that changed things. The princess expressed her gratitude for his readiness to support her and asked him what he intended to do with Sylph. Rudius announced that although his family members were separated at the time of the mass teleportation and he must gather them, he did not see himself traveling to Asura now. The princess reassured him that her debts to him could be repaid after he solved his business. Rudius focused and said he wanted to marry Sylph. Sylph and Luke were shocked by Rudius's declaration. Ariel pointed to Sylph and told her how to act with the information she learned from the conversation and pushed her forward. Sylph nervously told Rudius to take care of her, and Rudius blushed and asked her to take care of him too. Ariel advised Sylph to stop disguising herself as a boy. Sylph removed the sunglasses and stood next to her husband and thanked him for all the help he gave her. With this, our story ended today. So before we end our story, do not forget to like, share, and comment on the video, because that is what encourages us to continue. And if you are new to our channel, subscribe and activate the bell button to receive all updates. See you all later.